freaking move Kubiak over. He just gets bumped down. Let's just
Hi,
run the ball
hello
smooth
and
out.
welcome to the Fantasy Life Show as Dwain rambles on
Oh,
about
wow.
Frank
We're live.
Kubiak. We are live, everyone. Don't panic. Keep your composure. Ian Hartitz and your boy, Dwain McFarland, here to break down everything that just went down in an eventful week 3. And I mean eventful, Dwain. That started out hot and just when it seemed like things were slowing down in the afternoon. Nope, we had 2 or 3 other games freaking turn into fun, festive moments down in the end. So, yeah, fun time.
Yeah, I'm probably gonna have to embarrass myself in some way. Kind of like the opening of the show, just bitching about Gary Kubiak moving the Saints hat over out of view after this weekend. But yeah, Friedman got me on the calls last Thursday. I said, look, the 49ers are going to cover against the Rams. And after the first half, Ian, I felt great. After the first quarter, it was looking wonderful. I was like, this is in the bag. And the freaking, not only do they cover, they come back to actually win the game, the Rams. So yeah, a lot of fun afternoon action. I like this kind of slate personally, where it's more balanced out. Like I don't need 20 games, in the first, I know it's cool for like red zone for a little bit, but I like the balanced slate where I get 5 games still in the afternoon. This is my favorite.
I like having at least 4 in the afternoon so you can still have your quad box going on. But yeah, I also didn't have the best gambling day, Dwayne. I tweeted this morning that you miss 100% of the 8-leg parlays you do not bet, but it also turns out you kind of miss 100% of the ones you do bet as well. So as always, we'll watch the film and get better. But yeah, otherwise, guys, let's get straight into it with the Giants taking down the Browns 21-15. Giants close at 6.5-point dogs. Big day for the dogs, which I heard, man, it was going to be a good day for the bookmakers, like they needed any more cheddar. But hey, Dwayne, the under did cash at 38 thanks to one man and one man only. Devin Singletary, one of the biggest sheeshes you'll ever see, had a 44-yard touchdown at the end, but decided to do things like ice the game for his real life team and secure victory for the Giants at the expense of his fantasy managers as he went down at the 1-yard line instead of scoring the touchdown. So all jokes aside, really was another great day for the Giants offense. And Dwayne, they weren't even playing the Washington Commanders this time. Daniel Jones, 236 yards and 2 touchdowns, both to Malik Neighbors, who, my God, man, at this point, I know the argument's been him versus Marvin Harrison Jr. for months, but if you want to call Malik Neighbors a top 10 real-life wide receiver right now, I mean, the dude's certainly playing like it.
Absolutely. I mean, I think if you look at his pace over his first 3 games, like he's setting records for like career, like forever, like all the way back to the beginning of football time. Like what Malik Neighbors is doing is absolutely insane, Ian. But like if we look at him just from a pure standpoint, like of the utilization, this dude's sitting at a 36% target share after 3 games. That's absolutely insane, averaging 12 targets per game. Look at his air yard share, 59%. That's absolutely nuts. I mean, look, and he's hardly coming off the field either. Like he's sitting around a 94%, 95% route participation. So you've got a great player. He's out there all the time. He's earning his targets. And look, it's not like we've had great play from Daniel Jones, but today was definitely encouraging, Ian. So week 1, we had 186 passing yards from Daniel Jones. Week 2, now it's against the Vikings. Vikings look like a pretty good defense right now, right? Then week 2, yeah, we wanted more. They played the Commanders, only 178 yards, but to come out and get 236 against the Browns, I thought that was pretty solid. Like the Browns, I get it. Myles Garrett and some of the defense is hurting, but they're still a pretty good defense. So I thought that was a step in the right direction. If Daniel Jones can be like a 215 to 225 yard passer, Malik Neighbors has a chance to be a mid-range wide receiver 1 this year. We just can't have Daniel Jones being a 175 guy, which is still in the range of outcomes. If that happens, though, still, it's like what we talked about last week. Worst case, you've got a high-end wide receiver 2 in Malik Neighbors, and he's still going to give you these huge spike games.
And yeah, if we're going to say that, oh yeah, Vikings, Brian Flores, just a tough day at the office for CJ Stroud and for, Brock Purdy last week, we got to give that benefit of the doubt to Daniel Jones as well. 2 out of 3 games now, Dwayne, he has played some pretty good football. And again, that has been more than enough for Malik Neighbors to do his thing. So I understand a couple of those catches out there. It was like they were thrown for a 7-foot-tall human. But you know what? When Malik Neighbors has the catch radius of a freaking elephant, shout out Chad Johnson, those sports science episodes back in the day, man, things turned out just fine. So again, great day from Malik Neighbors, but you guys all knew that. Singletary, again, freaking 3 feet away from a second touchdown, still managed to have 108 yards on 20 touches. 62 of his 65 rushing yards came after contact. Dwain, I mean, I'm looking at it right now, man. 70% snap rate. He's been doing this all year. At what point do we say, hey, you know what? Singletary's got almost RB1 level utilization. And yeah, I understand this isn't exactly, the 49ers or the, Ravens offense we're expecting to see all these points, but Singletary, pretty good football player, and he's got great utilization. When does he become a must start?
Yeah, so probably never, but I mean, the fact of the matter is he does have the utilization. So I mean,
why never? He's doing it right now.
We just did this with Ramondre Stevenson last week. We just told everybody to sell high and the reasons why. Well, really, we have a lot of the same stuff. Here's what I will say. The Giants at least have Malik Neighbors, right? I mean, when you look at the Patriots, they have nothing. They do not have a weapon to get you excited that can help them move the football. So the Giants at least have that. That does help Devin Singletary. So maybe we feel better about him, than some guys, but he's still a low-end running back too at best, in my opinion. I do think certain matchups work out well for him. Others maybe not. To your point, like 70% snap share for running backs, man, like that's really good. But I still think you're going to get the bust games as well whenever you have a team that can really shut down the run. It was a good performance today. To your point, it could have been even bigger. I mean, we're talking about a guy that would have nearly scored 30 fantasy points. So in the running back 2 conversation, but I just don't think we can get overly excited and move him up towards like high-end running back 2 or low-end running back 1.
What makes Travis Etienne better than Devin Singletary in the year 2024?
What makes who? Travis Etienne?
Yes.
I mean, Travis Etienne, I think it's a good question.
He's better at averaging under 4 yards per carry than Singletary. I'll give him that.
Yeah. I mean, I get it. It's a fair thing, but I just think that the Jaguars are a better team than the Giants. That's what I would come back to. Like, I mean, if we suddenly feel like the Giants in 2 or 3 weeks from now is really like this way better team, then okay. But like right now, if I had to pick which team's going to have more wins, I think it's clearly going to be the Jaguars over the Giants. I mean, that's the biggest thing. It's the offensive environment that Devin Singletary lives within. It's not so much about the usage. It's the quality of the touches.
As much as I would love to make this, 2 hours of the Devin Singletary show, I will respectfully move on. And I do agree, Dwain, if you could potentially sell high on Singletary, a la Ramondre wouldn't be the worst idea ever. Again, I invite everyone to go to a lovely website that is in no way associated with us, maybe one day, but fantasycalc.com, a really great website to, again, just research some trades and see what actually people are trading for players with out there, because then that helps avoid the whole never in my league sort of slander and propaganda that we get going on. So, Dwain, let's look at the Cleveland Browns. Started out hot as hell. I mean, we saw the Giants muff the opening kickoff. They hit the ball. First play, Deshaun Watson finds Amari Cooper, and Cooper went on to have 86 yards and another touchdown in the game. So certainly broke out after a rough 2 weeks, which wasn't all that unexpected. We know Cooper's always been a bit boomer busty over his career, but man, rest of the offense really hit some tough sledding. Deshaun Watson took not 1, not 2. I will not keep going. 8 freaking sacks on the day. Please, for the love of God, get healthy Browns offensive tackles. I'm not saying Deshaun is completely devoid of blame for some of these sacks out here, but it really has been one pressure after another all season long in Cleveland. That said, Dwain, I think the most fantasy relevant thing going on here is this backfield continuing to change up. Week 1, Jerome Ford looked like an RB1 as far as the utilization was concerned. Then all of a sudden in week 2, Deontay Foreman's getting involved again. But here we sit after week 3, Dwain, and Jerome Ford's usage looking as good as almost anyone.
Yeah, Ford today had an 83% snap share, 59% of the team's rushing attempts, and a 64% route participation. Those are running back 1 levels. Again, that's utilization. We're not that crazy about the Browns offense, not crazy about their offensive line right now. They had Jedrick Wills came back today, but he ended up leaving that game. So I don't know how bad of a re-injury that was. I don't think he returned. So hopefully it's not something long-term, but they've definitely got to get healthy on the front, from the front 5. But Ford, that is 2 out of 3 games, but it is hard to say, man. Like last week, I have no clue where the Deontay Foreman thing came from. I have no clue where that came from. It was just completely out of the blue. Like they decided Deontay Foreman's the guy we need for this game plan. And then today it was back to Jerome Ford. Only gave you 10 fantasy points, but look, 2 out of 3, like we'll take it. 2 out of 3 is a good trend for Ford. So I would still say running back 3 territory, Ian. If he has another game like this, offensive line gets healthy, maybe he can move into the Devin Singletary tier.
All right, I think that is pretty much it for this one. So let's go ahead and move on to one of the better individual performances of the day, a revenge game special. Dwain, Packers took down the Titans 30-14, obviously covering as 3-point dogs, the overcash here at 37. And yes, Malik Willis, everybody, 202 passing yards, 1 touchdown, and 73 yards on the ground, as well as another score. Great revenge game. And as much as everyone's like, oh my God, Matt LaFleur deserves all this credit, he does. Don't get me wrong. I just feel like he is getting all that credit because lo and behold, Dwain, the Packers offense just keeps on keeping on, even without Jordan Love in the picture. So again, I guess, yeah, all the credit to LaFleur. I thought we were already given to the guy, but regardless of all that, Dwain, what did you see out of this, usage situation? Because I know as someone that has Josh Jacobs on several fantasy teams, I don't love seeing Emmanuel Wilson have, more freaking carries than him just about.
Yeah, and I checked that out. It wasn't just a first half thing because, these last 2 games, we've really seen, the Packers kind of in blowout scenarios, despite the fact that Malik Willis, and we do have to give LaFleur credit because, Malik Willis, let's be honest, was an afterthought.
We are giving him credit, but yeah.
Yeah, so to see him coming out here and doing this, and Malik, man, major hat tip to this guy. Look, using his scrambling ability involved in the design run game, hitting the big throws when he needs to hit them. I mean, Malik Willis is really the thing we hope that Justin Fields and Anthony Richardson, are on a week-to-week basis. He gave you freaking 25.4 fantasy points today. But yeah, going over to the Josh Jacobs thing, I went back and I checked just to make sure this wasn't a late game blowout thing, but it was really throughout the game where we saw these splits occurring between the two, and ended today with 51% of the snaps, 38% of the rushing attempts, 32% went to Emmanuel Wilson. Obviously, Malik Willis was also involved, stealing some of those carries as well. So we're just looking at the running backs. 14 to Josh Jacobs, 12 to Emmanuel Wilson. We did have a little bit of cleanup time from Chris Brooks, so we won't count those 3. He's not getting on the field if they're not leading, by double digits late in a game. So Jacobs, though, I still think he's probably fine, Ian. This is something we're going to have to monitor, but he was a guy that he's been on the injury report. He's been off the injury report by the end of the week, but he's been a little bit banged up over the last 2 weeks. So I'm going to I'll chalk it up to that for now. But if it's something that continues, obviously that's not a good thing, because I think, man, if Josh Jacobs gets the utilization that we've been used to in the past, and he gets, 60, 65%, of the rushing attempts behind this offensive line with this scheme, you get Jordan Love back, man, there's a lot to like about Josh Jacobs right now.
I did check the injury report, and he has been limited throughout each of the past 2 weeks with a back injury, but same participation again this week as last when he had 32 rushes, and that, again, another win for the Packers. So we'll see what happens as we move on forward, but with no Marshawn Lloyd for the foreseeable future, Emmanuel Wilson, who did look spry out there, had a nice 30-yard touchdown on a screen pass, someone that, again, in deeper leagues you can't look to because God forbid something happens to Josh Jacobs, Emmanuel Wilson come on down to the RB2 conversation. Christian Watson, 67 yards. Jaden Reed, 50 plus 19 rushing yards. Look, Dwain, I understand that we still, as nice as Malik Willis has played over these last 2 weeks, starting Packers wide receivers without Jordan Love under center is going to continue to be a very scary proposition. That said, I saw you tweeting about some changing usage. Maybe, just maybe, everyone's favorite offseason sleeper, Dontavian Wicks, moving up the depth chart a little bit.
Yeah, Dontavian Wicks has really forced not an even split, but he's really cut into Christian Watson's role over the last 2 games. So if we look at weeks 2 and weeks 3, 52% route participation for Dontavian Wicks with a 19% target share. Watson still with a slight lead at 60% route participation and a 6% target share. But Wicks is a guy that we know has played really well whenever he's been given the opportunities. He's continuing to do that. He's got a better target share right now than Christian Watson. So I do think this is something that we could see continue, Ian, or it could just flatline right here. They could just decide to rotate these 2 guys. They both offer something. So we'll see what happens. But I do think, in a lot of these leagues where Wicks is sitting out there available and you're really looking for some upside on your bench at wide receiver, Wicks is really a name that we should be thinking about. And I'm going to look him up real quick here, Ian, while you say something really interesting. I'm looking him up on Yahoo to see how often he's only rostered 14% in Yahoo. So I know some of you are listening to this and going, what league is Dontavian Wicks available in? Well, 86% of them. Not everybody's in leagues like the ones you guys listening and me and Ian are in. Where no, Dontavian Wicks is never available. But Dwain, only rostered 14%.
Check Dobbs real quick while you're there. Because the thing is, Dobbs is the one that has the role that we hope Wicks has, yet I bet his roster isn't even that different.
No, he's more, but still only 44%. So, yeah, I mean, this guy's available too. So both of those guys are probably under rostered. I mean, Christian Watson, we could probably do this thing all day, but the big takeaway would be Wicks is probably available in many of the leagues for people that are listening. Romeo Dobbs will be available in some of them as well.
And guess what? They're not going to be available in as many leagues. Once Jordan Love is back under center, which does seem to be imminent, whether it's week 4 or week 5. So now would be as good as time as any to scoop up those Packers receivers off the waiver wire. Over with the Titans, another game in the legend that is the Will Levis experience. 8 sacks out there, Dwain. Look, he had some good moments, and I do think people miss that. I mean, 260 yards and 2 touchdowns. They have a pair of picks. I mean, even last week against the Jets, like we all see the one meme-worthy play per week, and he actually did have another one as he lost a fumble. And then after getting drilled, he got drilled again trying to pick up the football. So don't get me wrong. I understand the hilarity in the whole thing, but you see Levis taking more chances downfield than, more bad quarterbacks. And for that, we appreciate it. And today, at least, got things going for DeAndre Hopkins. 6 catches on 7 targets, 73 yards, and a pretty touchdown, a back shoulder fade wherein, what's the word I'm looking for? Vintage DeAndre Hopkins fashion, spun his way into the end zone there at the end. So came at the expense of Calvin Ridley, Dwain, just 1 catch for 9 scoreless yards on only 3 targets. Sadly, don't think we're seeing enough from Levis to expect, consistent fantasy production out of anyone. That said, did we at least get a utilization bump up for Hopkins, someone who's been playing limited snaps due to that ongoing MCL issue?
We didn't get the bump up that we wanted, Ian, from a route participation, only 50% today. But man, I think it was still a positive to see DeAndre Hopkins out there earning targets, because up until this time, we've not seen that either. Like, he wasn't on the field, and when he was on the field, he wasn't getting targets. He had a 32% targets per route run today, over a 20% target share. He actually led the team. So I think it's a step in the right direction, but we are going to need to see this man on the field for 80, 90% route participation before we can trust him in our lineups. You mentioned Will Levis. While the thing is trending the right way with 127 yards passing in week 1, 192 yards passing week 2, 260 in week 3. So, I mean, if Levis can be in that 215 to 225 range, like one of Hopkins and Calvin Ridley can do their thing each week. But man, Hopkins to be in that conversation, we've got to see him on the field. But he is a guy that has been released quite a bit in these smaller type leagues. Like looking at DeAndre Hopkins right now, he is available on Yahoo. He's only rostered 56% of the time. So this is another guy that you guys, if you're really needing wide receiver help. Now, again, going to be tough to get him in your lineup till we know he's in that full-time role, but I think it's really good to see him earning the targets, Ian. That's the first step. And honestly, because they could put him out there and run him in route, and he could be out there for route participation and not be earning targets. And it could be like, okay, is he just a decoy or what? But to see him getting the targets, that gives me some confidence that maybe that MCL is getting better.
Nothing too much going on in the backfield. Pollard, though, continuing to lead the way, 64% snaps and 9 combined carries and targets to 6 for Spears. So Tajah did have a nice catch and run at some point. He still looks good out there, but at this point, Dwain, really seems like Spears is more of a handcuff only. Do you think he's someone who needs to be on rosters in some of these, 10-team leagues, or maybe a 12-team league with a shallow bench? Because bye weeks are coming up, man, and we're going to have to make some tough decisions.
I would really not want to be releasing Tajay Spears, to be honest. I just still think he's a very talented player. I think some of what we're seeing, can be injury related. The week before, before he got hurt in that game, he was actually out snapping. He had more routes, more carries, and everything than Tony Pollard. So we were potentially seeing that hot hand game that really the coaching staff has really talked about this entire offseason. Mm-hmm. But you know how it goes. Then an injury happens, and that changes everything. And then he was, limited all week this week. He actually missed some practice. So I would want to wait another week for Tajay Spears. He's not a guy that you just absolutely can't drop. If you guys have something you got to go get, but overall, I would prefer keeping Spears versus dropping him.
The Colts took down the Bears 21-16, covering as 1.5-point favorites. The under did cash here at 43.5. Anthony Richardson, could you please, man, complete over 50% of your passes for one game? Certainly was not today. 10 of 20, 167 yards, and a pair of interceptions, one of which was absolutely horrendous. Man, look, Dwain, we've got a lot invested in Richardson. I'm not jumping out of the plane, the drastically free-falling plane at this point. But man, some of the off-target throws, like his incompletion just hurt a little bit more than the other ones that you'll see out there. Just completely sailing one over Josh Downs' head. That could have been an easy 10 yards. And then guess what? When Trey Sermon ends up vulturing his touchdown after he gets down the 1-yard line, we do not make up for it in fantasy land. So Richardson helped push Sermon into the end zone. If that helps your fantasy dud feel any better. But overall, panic here for Anthony Richardson fantasy managers, Dwayne, because again, week 1 was great. Last 2 weeks, not so much.
Yeah, look, it's still what you had to expect. Like, we knew that he was going to struggle as a passer. He's got 212 yards, 204 yards, 167 yards. I want to say in our FantasyLife season-long projections, we had him projected for like 210 passing yards per game. So he's basically right at that. We just need him to come through on the ground. Like, right now, we're not getting what we want from him, on the ground. Like, he's still getting the carries in, but the last 2 games, his scrambles, when week 1, 3, down to 2, down to 1, only 8 yards on scrambles today. Design rushing attempts still had 4, but only for 20 yards. So the efficiency really hasn't been there on the ground where we expect him to be someone that can make those really big plays, like Justin Fields was even 2 years ago. Despite the fact that he wasn't a great passer, we were like, okay, but we can get a 50-yard touchdown run out of this man. So I do think those things are ultimately going to come back to Anthony Richardson, but Justin Fields is kind of in a similar spot, and we haven't seen him really breaking out. So I do get it. Like, people looking at some of these dual threat quarterbacks that, aren't doing it on the passing side, we're not seeing what we necessarily hoped out of them early in the season. But I do think it's too early to bell because we have very, very long-standing trends on these things, Ian. Remember the quote we had? We were like, okay, quarterbacks under 3,500 yards passing, so not really good passers that had at least 100 rushing attempts. We've seen 21 of those since 2011. That's how many times we've said this, guys. It's burned into my freaking skull. I'm not looking at anything right now. They average 21 fantasy points per game and average finishing as the QB 8. Anthony Richardson's still going to score fantasy points. It's just been a crappy 2 weeks.
Remember, Dwayne, if he doesn't finish top 12, I got to ride my freaking bike all the way to Indianapolis. So in addition to my bank account, I would really appreciate it if Richardson could get things going. Next week against the Steelers, though, like, Dwayne, that's a tough matchup. Colts versus Steelers in week 4. Would you rather start Anthony Richardson or Sam Darnold?
Oh, no, man. We got to go Derek Carr right now. Yeah. It's like I think when you look at the matchups like that in the really tough spots, if you want to get away from Richardson, I don't blame you, but I'm not going out of my way, to do it. I mean, this week, we saw Justin Fields go out and play against, a rush defense that's been really tough with the Chargers, and he scored his rushing touchdown this weekend. So these things can be really weird, but I wouldn't blame someone, Ian, in the tougher matchups against the run if you want to get Anthony Richardson onto the bench. I get it.
And for what it's worth, it does seem like the backlash for, someone like Richardson, it's not a racial thing or anything like that. I just think it's the dual threat quarterbacks, because we're used to their passing numbers being down. Like, when they don't score on the ground, it's almost like made into a bigger deal than when we just see the pocket passers not find the end zone through the air, because almost like their ceiling isn't as clear in our minds, if that makes any sense at all. But anyways, elsewhere on the Colts, Jonathan Taylor, 110 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground. Again, looked very good out there. And Dwayne, we got the elite usage back, 87% snaps. Does seem possible that big drop off in week 2 could have been more due to Taylor having that ill-timed drop in the third quarter on 4th down. Whatever it was, not that Jonathan Taylor was leaving our lineups anytime soon, but God forbid we can get this consistently, Dwayne. This is top 3 level utilization.
And Jonathan Taylor looks amazing. Jonathan Taylor looks like the Jonathan Taylor from 3 years ago. The burst, the vision, the strength, the elusiveness, the tackle breaking, like all of it. Like, and it's funny. It's like, I'm looking at some of these numbers for him, it's like his yak was 1.8 yards after contact was 1.8 today. Like, not the plays I was watching. Like, okay, so
they weren't touching him because he was finding the holes.
That's true. He was just. You're right. It probably was a yards, but you're probably right. It was a yards before contact thing today.
That's why yak's a little sometimes.
Yeah, it can be. So Jonathan Taylor looked great. Like the elusiveness and the acceleration was there. So when you look at JT, yeah, you mentioned it. Like 87% snap share this weekend. Ian, 77% rush attempts and 91% route participation. Man, that is astronomical. He had an 11% target share today. So yeah, JT very, very locked into the mid-range to high-end running back 1 conversation. You should be feeling absolutely great. If we could just get Anthony Richardson to do anything, like JT, man, the upside, like he scored 27 fantasy points already for you today, so you're not complaining. But man, it would be really nice if Richardson could make this offense, if we could sustain some things and maybe convert some third downs.
This was not the easiest matchup, and even the Packers are playing a bit better on defense than I think we expected. So maybe we'll look back at what Richardson's been doing early on the season and cut him a little bit of slack in a few weeks. But last point here, Dwayne, we did get the return of Josh Downs. And look, Michael Pittman's still the alleged number 1 in this offense, but I would be surprised if he's inside our consensus top 30 next week, maybe even top 36. So I get it. We can't really trust any wide receivers in Indy right now. But with all 4 parties now involved, Dwayne, who was the odd man out?
Yeah, it was Adonai Mitchell with Josh Downs back. So Adonai Mitchell today, route participation fell to 9%. So this is a guy,
Nine?
look, yeah, 9.
Yikes.
9, as in not on the field. So you look at Josh Downs, man, 73% route participation. Also tied for the team lead with Michael Pittman with a 28% target share. What's that worth when Anthony Richardson's your quarterback? Not much right now, but again, maybe Richardson can get a little bit better. Today, Josh Downs was mostly used around the line of scrimmage. Ian only had, looking at his air yard share, 8%. So he was not getting thrown down the field. And Alec Pierce kept his role. He was still the deep guy, 91% route participation. Obviously didn't come through today, only 4.9 fantasy points, but it was Alec Pierce staying on the field and Adonai Mitchell headed to the bench. So Mitchell can be dropped, in most of your leagues. We'll keep an eye on it for you. If something happens and it turns around, we come back and we get him. Maybe it's an injury. But even with that, Ian, it's just tough. We now have Pierce doing enough that we know he's going to be involved every week. So we have 3 wide receivers with Anthony Richardson. They're going to run the ball. He's going to be inaccurate. It's going to be really tough to start any of these wide receivers. As much as we love Josh Downs, and he is someone that if you're playing in a deeper league, you should be picking him up off the waiver wire because he is the clear-cut number 3 right now in the offense.
Over on the Bears side of things, 363 yards and a pair of scores through the air for Caleb Williams. And when you hear those numbers, you would probably assume that this Bears offense was just firing on all cylinders. Alas, Dwain, it really was. It ended up having a ton of play volume, 52 dropbacks for Caleb Williams. And as a team, they had 28 rush attempts as well. So don't get me wrong. He looked obviously a lot better than he did in the first 2 weeks. Now, the bar was not very high, but we did get more of that vintage, just out of the pocket, making a man miss and then delivering a dart on the run. Also some dimes from the pocket as well, most of which went to Rome Odunze. 6 catches, 112 yards, and a touchdown. First career score for both Caleb and Rome. They had a cool little moment where they were fighting over who got to keep the ball in the end zone. Would have been a lot cooler if it was like in the first quarter of week 1, not, the second half of week 3. But either way, nice moment for, again, the pair of top 10 overall picks. Cole Kmet, 10 catches, 97 yards, and a touchdown. Even DJ Moore going out there and catching eight balls for 78 scoreless yards as well. Pretty nice day overall for the Bears passing game, Dwain. So just, hey, man, nice to get that data point where, again, had some tougher matchups to open up the year. Titans defense that has played a bit better, I think, against the pass than maybe we expected coming in. And then Will Anderson, the Texans last week on Sunday Night Football. We all saw how impossible of a situation that was for Caleb. So thoughts on Caleb and Rome moving forward? Are you drinking the Kool-Aid a little bit and getting back to where we were before the season started?
Well, it's like you said, Caleb showing that big playability, but again, it was crazy play volume. And it's like one of those things where, like, I would like to see Caleb have to do what he's doing like 2 plays a game where you're like, oh man, look, he saved that 3rd down and 9. He scrambled out of He's having to do it every play. I feel like there should be like that. I don't even know what that song is called, but like something wild going on in the
I know what you're saying.
Every time the freaking Bears snap the ball. I think this Benny Hill might be what that that music goes back to, like a really old reference, but it's just like, it's comical. Like he's holding on to the ball a really long time. So I do feel like part of it's on Caleb. He's got to get better at processing. And then part of it comes back to Shane Waldron. So I don't trust the offense overall. It's an encouraging thing because, Caleb's making the big plays, but those are the things we knew that he could do. We need to now see Caleb Williams make the on-time throws. We need to see Caleb Williams keeping the offense out of 3rd and long. We know the big plays can be there, but let's just do the little things that help keep an offense going. So step in the right direction. Still a lot more that I want to see from Caleb Williams. Now, Rome Odunze, man, this is huge. I mean, this is a guy that was dealing with an MCL issue just 2 weeks ago. So for him to already come back here, Ian, and post today a 23% target share, he accounted for 49% of the team's air yards on his way to 23.4 fantasy points in a PPR format. So Cole Kmet, you mentioned as well. It does appear that they're not worried about giving Gerald Everett, over half the, receiving snaps. So at least Shane Waldron has figured that. As much as we like Gerald Everett, Cole Kmet had a nice year last year. It was kind of a breakout year for him. And the Bears have paid him recently. So you're seeing that guy get out there. And then you already mentioned it, DJ Moore doing his thing. But the big thing here is Rome Odunze. I think this is a reminder that Rome, like when Caleb does have his games, man, he's going to give you that wide receiver 2, wide receiver 1 upside. I think he's locked into that wide receiver 3 range. If you want to call him a boom bust wide receiver 4, I won't blame people because I do think it's going to come down to like just, okay, did they have a good game today or not? And if they do, it's going to be good for Rome. The other thing, though, is like, when will Keenan Allen be back? I'm getting a little worried about this heel thing, Ian. I don't know if you've heard anything, like if this is the same thing he dealt with last year, because it was a heel, if I'm not mistaken, that kept him out at the end of last year.
Yeah, but it seemed like a heel cross with this team is dead in the water without Herbert anymore. So I never was seemingly stressed to us that it was that serious. But no, I'm with you, man. It's concerning for sure.
Yeah. So if as long as Keenan Allen's out, let's just say Rome's wide receiver 3 with wide receiver 2 upside. Obviously, there's a low floor there. And then Cole Kmet, that obviously helps him because he's getting a lot of those targets on the inside that would go to Keenan. Once Keenan's back and healthy, I think the number one person that hurts is Cole Kmet.
Yakety Sacks, by the way, Dwain. Shout out to AJ Hawk's Toxic Finger for getting us that there in the YouTube chat. Otherwise, just on the Bears, there was a lot of sheesh going on there. DJ Moore, again, mentioned the big day. The big part of it was a 44-yard reception on a Hail Mary before halftime. Sadly, he got tackled at the 1-yard line and could not cross the ball over the plane. Would have been a lot cooler if he did. And yeah, with Rome Odunze, man, second most unrealized air yards on the week with 160. So only had 5 targets thrown his way that were incomplete. But my goodness, was there a lot of potential on set targets. Last thing here, Dwain, in the backfield, it's been the DeAndre Swift show. Now it hasn't been all that effective. And as things are prone to happen when your lead running back isn't doing great, sometimes they start losing that great utilization, Dwain.
Yeah, we've talked about this multiple times. Even like preseason stuff, we can get a pretty good feel for who the leaders are at the position, who's in the pole position, and who should probably start the season as getting most of the work. But then you have to perform to hang on to that, Ian, and that has been an absolute challenge for DeAndre Swift. Was not good again today. Came out here and only gave you 13 design rush plays for 20 yards. Not good. So he had a 52% snap share, 46% of the team's rushing attempts. We did have Travis Homer move on to IR, and so that opened the door for Roschon Johnson to play his first game, somebody that missed the end of the preseason with a toe injury. He had a 29% rush share. So if you're playing in one of those deep gross leagues where whenever we talk about some of these other guys, you're like, not in my league. Well, Roschon Johnson is available in like 99% of leagues right now. So if you're looking for a running back stash and you're in a really gross format, Roschon Johnson, that's a name to remember. Obviously, we need the Bears to play better, but he does look like right now he's past Khalil Herbert to be the running back 2 behind someone struggling in DeAndre Swift.
Moving on, we had the Vikings take down the Texans in a bit of a shocker, 34-7. Minnesota was, 1.5 point underdogs going in, so definitely a shocker from that perspective. The under did cash at 46.5. So Sam freaking Darnold, Dwain, Dick Darnold, if you want to use his middle name, Richard. I think that's what we should call him from now on. 181 yards through the air, not 1, not 2, not 3, 4 touchdowns. And man, as much as we want to say like, oh yeah, when he knows where his first read is, he's able to throw a good ball, but muddle the pocket and things start breaking down. I don't know, man. I'm just starting to see more and more examples of him throwing absolute dimes out there, Dwayne. I understand we can look at history and it says, quarterbacks that don't ball out with their first team seldom do more and more in the future. You know what? Football in 2024 is a little bit different than it was 25 plus years ago. So maybe we need to accept the reality that Sam Darnold is one of the best quarterbacks alive. I'm kidding, kind of, Dwayne. He looks freaking great out there, man. And through 3 weeks, I did this study on Friday. It was an article on FantasyLife.com, and you guys can check it out over there. But just looking at kind of when does the data start to correlate and actually lead to, sustained fantasy excellence. That was a long way of saying that. But basically, when we see these early season fluke weeks at running back and then to a lesser extent at quarterback, that's where you do see more volatility in terms of the early season producers, maybe not necessarily keeping on as the rest of the season goes. The pass catchers tend to be much more stable throughout that. So I want to be a little careful, Dwayne, but that said, man, we've seen it now back-to-back weeks against the 49ers, against the Texans. He's only got one guy to throw the football out to right now in Justin Jefferson, and he looks great doing it. So Sam Darnold, if you had to rank the quarterbacks the rest of the season, I think it would be hard pressed, man, to name 10 guys better.
Yeah, he's a borderline QB1. And again, there's some similar things that we've talked about with Derek Carr. I know we'll get to him in a little bit, and he kind of crapped the bed today. But look, the accuracy's there. You've got the weapons around him. We like the scheme. And look, we're 3 weeks in. 3 data points. I get it. It's not a for sure thing, but we're much closer to it being a sure thing than week 1. And he has done it, to your point, against the 49ers and the Texans back-to-back. So I think right now Sam Darnold is at worst a high-end QB2, but I think you could consider him as a low-end QB1. Or as Ian likes to say in those scenarios, a borderline QB1. That's how he gets away with that, folks.
Quick giving away my trade secrets over here, Dwayne. Sam Darnold or Dak Prescott the rest of the way?
I'm still going to lean into Dak. I mean, Dak's just got too long of a history, but again, I had to pause.
Yeah, you paused.
I had to pause.
Let the record show that Dwayne paused over there. So again, great stuff for Sam Darnold, and honestly, could have even been a more prolific day. Jalen Naylor had yet another wide open touchdown. This one 30 yards out, nullified due to an illegal pick, which it was. So good job, Zebras. Aaron Jones also could have had a bigger day. Got stopped at the 1 yard line and then did not score on the same drive. But fantasy managers cannot be complaining too much. 102 yards on the ground, 46 through the air, and a receiving touchdown as well. For 6 missed tackles on the ground, Dwayne, that was the second highest mark of the week per PFF when I was checking that before. So Aaron Jones, man, 25 combined carries and targets. I know Ty Chandler continues to hang around a little bit, but more and more, man, seems like he is certainly more of a, clear-cut number 2 as opposed to a 1B. Aaron Jones, man, he's starting to knock on that RB1 door if he hasn't already bashed the dang thing down.
Yeah, man, 70% route participation. It looks like last week where we had Ty Chandler kind of tighten things up, it probably was injury related. And we talked about that because Aaron Jones did leave that game for a little bit, and that might have limited him in that second half of the game. This week, we clearly saw him back in the lead role. Of course, he arrived to the stadium wearing the sombrero,
Always.
I mean, so it was going to be an Aaron Jones kind of day. You should have known right away when he shows up in the sombrero. But he also had, 44% route participation. So that's where Ty Chandler's really getting some work. He's taking, which I don't get, because Aaron Jones, maybe if we said his best attribute might be him as a receiver out of the backfield, but that's where Ty Chandler's still throwing he's a little bit of a relief pitcher there. But yeah, only 26% of the carries today for Ty Chandler and 70% for Aaron Jones. So it does, to your point, look a little bit more like a 1 and a 2 versus a 1A, 1B.
For the record, I saw some people on Twitter trying to find fault with Aaron Jones wearing the sombrero. It's because, as a alumni of the University of Texas, El Paso, shout out to the Miners, they have sombreros all over El Paso. So Aaron Jones is literally just paying homage to his former school and community. So great stuff there from A. Aaron. Revenge game in Lambeau next week against the Packers. Cannot wait to see that one. And yeah, Justin Jefferson, 81 yards and a touchdown on 8 targets. More typical king shit from Planet Earth's wide receiver 1. All right, Dwayne, on the Texans side of the football, tough performance from CJ Stroud and company. But again, as I think we're finding out, going into Minnesota to try to play is not easy business for anyone. There's a point in the first half where they take 3 straight false start penalties as they try to just get the freaking playoffs. So again, 215 yards through the air wasn't ideal. And accordingly, didn't see the biggest games out of these wide receivers, but still not bad. Stephon Diggs, 10 catches for 94 scoreless yards. Nico Collins, 4 for 86. And Tank Dell, 5 for 62. I will note, I don't think it was an injury. They showed Stroud maybe moving a little bit slow, but I thought it was a mercy pull more than anything, down 27 points in the fourth quarter. They had Davis Mills out there, and he tried to throw it to Nico 3 or 4 straight times in the end zone, had him open, wasn't able to get it. So could have, should have, would have been a bigger day for Nico Collins. But Dwayne, I think the big question coming in was what Cam Akers was going to do with his backfield with no Joe Mixon and with no Damian Pierce, and getting pregame verbiage that Joe Mixon could be considered week to week. What did we see from Cam Akers, and what can we call him in the fantasy ranks landscape ahead of week 4?
Yeah, so this was a really bad run out for Akers. Getting down, 3 scores right away in this game took the run game away, from the Texans. Had the run game been there, you would have seen a lot more from Cam Akers today. On the few carries he did have, Ian, a couple of them looked really good. He only ended up with 9 carries for 21 yards. It might have been his first or second carry of the game. He had a defender right in his lap. He makes the cut back to the left, gets through the hole, accelerates. Some of the same stuff that we saw in the preseason and even last week on a carry before he ended up fumbling inside the 10-yard line that got him benched. So I think Cam Akers, the eye test, still definitely passing it for me. And 64% of the rushing attempts. So you get the Texans in a typical game script, not one where you're in a blowout, trailing situation right away in the first quarter or in the early first half. I think you're going to have some good things here from Cam Akers. Dare Ogunbowale, like we thought, was a factor in the passing game, but we said that would probably be the case, but only 31% route participation. So it wasn't like, he took all of it away from Cam Akers. So I think what you're going to get with Akers is you're going to get a lot of the carries that went to Mixon, maybe 2/3 of the passing down work that Mixon was getting. And in a good offense like this with the Texans, I still think that's going to give you some running back 1 upside, but at worst case, we're going to be ranking him as a low end running back 2, mid-range running back 2, depending on the matchup.
Final note, still very much in on buying low on Tank Dell after another not so great performance. Hard yes. Okay. No pause there for everyone counting.
Nothing there. Yeah, the route stuff's all still close. He was the third guy in routes today, but it's all really close.
Fair enough, my friend. All right, guys, let's move on to what was supposed to be one of the highest scoring matchups of the day, but alas, here we are saying it was not. The Eagles beat the Saints 15-12. Philly did obviously cover as 2.5-point dogs. The under easily cashed at 49. All right, I guess we got to talk Eagles first. Winners write the history books, Dwain. We'll get into our Clint Kubiak, not so happiness in a couple minutes. But Jalen Hurts, man, 311 yards through the air, no touchdowns, 1 interception, just 25 rushing yards, though. And when did this guy just completely lose the ability to run fast? All right, he is so strong. I get it. I've seen him squat, a house a million times. But he ran up, 4.5, 4.6, 40 at the combine. And now I'm seeing defensive linemen, man, hawk this dude down before he can get to the corner. It's just, there's no more just twitch or burst out there. And I thought last year it was because he was playing through all those injuries, but hey, maybe he's already gotten banged up this year. Either way, just sucks that we don't have that 40 or 50 yard rushing yard per game floor. And when we got Saquon Barkley starting to snipe those touchdowns from much further out than 1 yard, it makes life more difficult for Jalen Hurts fantasy managers. So no, we're not dropping him out of the top 3 or 5 or anything like that with the QB rankings. But again, just don't quite see maybe that league breaking ceiling as vividly as we have in past years. And Saquon is a big reason for that, Dwain. 147 yards on the ground, 2 touchdowns, one of which was a 65-yard gallop that was absolutely breathtaking to see. So great game from Saquon, someone who, again, not that anyone was all that low on him, even quote-unquote faders of Saquon still had him ranked as the RB6. But man, Dwain, on any given week now, this dude has what it takes to be an overall RB1.
Yeah, I mean, and you just see the burst, with Saquon, and he's got these huge holes working with the offensive line. But even when he doesn't, man, he's reading the line so well, making the one little subtle adjustment that he needs to make, and he's downhill. A lot of those things that Saquon did when he was younger, where he was trying to always bounce things around so much, he's kind of settled that down. And it's like he's kind of found his home of, okay, this is my sweet spot now, and this is where I need to be operating. And he looks really, really good doing it. You already mentioned it with the 17 carries for 147, and the long touchdown, which, look, first ball carrier this year to reach 110 miles per hour. Saquon Barkley, just running away from the honey badger and taking off from these guys. So yeah, Saquon looking good. The only downside with him is, having to share the carries inside the 5. But to your point, doing a good job of once he's getting these opportunities, being a little bit better than what we saw from the Eagles in previous seasons. So yeah, Saquon 33.6 fantasy points. PPR scoring format today. Dude looks absolutely crazy. Not leaving the field, 82% of the snaps, and 73% route participation. So we'll see what happens with Devonta Smith. Got a concussion in this game. We'll see where he's at. That was a brutal hit. That was a pretty gross hit, but I don't even know who that Saints defender was, but that was pretty gruesome. Basically he's already getting tackled and pushed back towards you and just to put a helmet in his ear hole. Anyway. Yeah. Whatever, Hartitz. That
whistle hadn't blown. You're rallying the football.
Yeah, fine.
He's weighs 165 pounds, man. All hits are going to look kind of rough,
Yeah, I know, but it's it looked just like the dude's coming in with the tip of his helmet. But anyway, so looking at, the rest of the squad, we'll see how healthy they are. But where I was going with it is we could even see more targets for Saquon for a couple of weeks, depending on how healthy these guys are. Because if a team has to truly put the clamps on Dallas Goedert, where else are we going? Jahan Dotson's out here running around still not getting targets with everyone on the Eagles hurt. Even Tan Covey or whatever his name was hurt, and Jahan Dotson can't earn a target.
What do you call him?
I don't know what his name is. Something Covey.
Britton Covey.
Britton. I guess I don't know what it is. If you're a little small white dude on the Eagles not getting much playing time, I call you Britann.
That's
just the way it is.
That's Utes legend Britton Covey, who returned a kickoff of the house against the Buckeyes in the Rose Bowl. That's how I know his name, Dwain. So keep an eye on them Buckeyes out there. But yeah, again, you mentioned the big game from Dallas Goedert. 10 catches, 170 yards on 11 targets. Had a 61-yard catch and run. I mean, look, kudos to the Eagles for getting the victory, man. But the fact the Saints let Goddard get free for that 61-yard,
three defenders running into one another was
exactly if they did not completely bust that, I had absolutely no confidence in the Eagles driving down the field and doing what they did. But hey, guess what? 15 points in the fourth quarter for the Eagles. They got the W. Good for them. Over on the Saints side of things, Dwain, again, just All we were asking for was a tight game to let this Saints passing game really open up. And guess what? When they did throw the football, they looked more than capable of doing it. Chris Olave got targeted 6 times, and lo and behold, caught 6 of those passes for 86 yards and a touchdown that put him ahead with just over 2 minutes on the clock. Yes, Rashid Shaheed had a goose egg, but man, just a bit better throw from Derek Carr. Or honestly, if you want to say Rashid Shaheed squeezed that pass on a potential 40-yard touchdown.
He's got to catch that.
That's what I'm saying. It was a little bit underthrown, but it still got to his chest. So
hit him in his shoulders and into the chest. Yeah.
And like I said, I'm fine with that. Catch the ball, Rashid Shaheed. But my point is, the passing game was working when they were trying to do it. Yet here we are at the end of the game, Dwain. A tight game throughout. And Alvin Kamara had more rush attempts than Derek Carr had pass attempts against an Eagles defense that you and me, look, I get it, man. Clint Kubiak's going to forget more about football than you and I will ever know in our respective lives, and that's fine. But how can you look at that Eagles defense and say, you know what, let's really test that front seven? That's what I want to attack here, not a secondary that we haven't seen anyone slow down for the better part of the last season and a half. So thoughts on Clint Kubiak? And yeah, man, you turned his hat around to start the show, Dwain. So it's serious with you, I know.
Yeah, I mean, look, I had the same concerns as you. Like the passing game was working. The Eagles secondary has been terrible. And then you come out here and you drop back to pass 49% of the time. I do wonder if some of this is being dictated to him by Dennis Allen. I mean, the head coaches get a say in the style, right? That you're the way you're going to deploy, your offense from a standpoint of how often you're going to run the ball versus pass the ball. So I do wonder that. And to your point, we thought, oh, finally you get into a matchup where it's going to be close. We're going to get a little bit more passing, or at least we just get more drop backs, even if the pass rate doesn't, or drop back rate doesn't go up, but just because they actually need to throw the ball in the second half, that would be a good thing. Didn't turn out to be the case here today. I'm not going to freak out. Kubiak's still punching up all the cheat code stuff, but yeah, this was that time where you're like, okay, like the Eagles, if they have something, it's a front seven. Yeah. Like they're stacked. They've got Jordan Davis up there. They've got, why's my mind going blank? The first Jalen Carter. I mean, they've spent some high draft capital putting these big bodies on the front four, and it wasn't working, and you just kept going back to it, and you ended up losing the game. So in my opinion, I do believe the Saints didn't make the right adjustments to ultimately win. To your point, we were one catch from Rashid Shaheed away from a little bit better day for Derek Carr. So I'm not downgrading Derek Carr right now, but did you hear CJ Gardner-Johnson after the game?
He's always talking smack.
I know. He was like, you got to remember Derek Carr's still Derek Carr, was essentially, what he said. So, hey, CJ Gardner-Johnson, yeah, major trash talker, but also an NFL player that, he knows which quarterbacks are good and which ones aren't. And he's not a believer yet, Ian and Mr. Derek Carr.
He's one of those guys too, man. You just see how physical he is and like how he brings that to the defense. I mean, that Super Bowl against the Chiefs, man, nobody was complaining. I know, guys, I want to see NFC Championship last year too. I hear you, Lions fan. The guy isn't a perfect player, but I just appreciate when guys play with that fire. And CJ Johnson certainly is out there doing that. So anything else here really on the Saints, Dwain? Again, I'm not going to completely overreact to one. Let's face it, not the best game of football, but man, Alvin Kamara, 87% snap rate. We finally saw Chris Olave get that breakout game that we were hoping for. Hope you guys bought low while you could. Still an offense that maybe if it's not going to be the top 1 or top 3 world beater we're hoping for, certainly still seems like an above average group for anyone to deal with.
Yeah, I think the one thing here is we're more locked into probably a run balanced offense. We didn't know for sure what this offense would look like in the right kind of situation. So it does look like they're going to want to try to stick with the run more. That limits the overall targets and things, but efficiency should still be there, I think, for the Saints overall. The one big thing I'll say here, Ian, is like Rashid Shaheed gave you the 0. We already talked about the missed touchdown down the sideline, but things were really the same for him. He still had an 89% route participation, had a 22% target share, so he's right where he's been for the season. And then when we look at Alvin Kamara, I mean, good God, 87% of the snaps, 93% of the rush attempts. Now, you didn't have Taysom Hill in this game, but Jamal Williams, man, only 4% of the carries. They gave all of this to Alvin Kamara. So Kamara has had the huge blow up games in week 1 and 2 from an efficiency standpoint. That wasn't there today, but it was good to see, man. Like they didn't care. They loaded this guy up in a really big game. So Alvin Kamara, man, locked into that mid-range running back 1 to high-end running back 1 conversation.
No Taysom Hill, no Kendre Miller, and you still only get Jamal Williams 1 carry. What did you pay the
I
guy
don't
for?
understand.
I have
Yeah.
absolutely no idea there. So, only final note would be Rashid Shaheed's certainly going to be in the Sheesh report, not just for that drop, but really for the targets as a whole. 109 unrealized air yards, Dwayne, third most on the week. Jameson Williams didn't have the best game either. Boom or bust wide receiver, 3 types. It seems we got some booms, and now sadly we saw some busts. So, still plenty of games to get to, everyone. But first, a quick word to our friends over at DraftKings. A chill in the air, leaves falling to the ground, and football every weekend. That is what fall is about, and you can make each weekend even more exciting by getting into the action with our partners at DraftKings, the #1 place to bet on touchdowns. And right now, all new customers who bet $5 will instantly get $200 in bonus bets. All you got to do is download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and sign up using our promo code FANTASYLIFE. The crown is yours. Again, that's $200 in bonus bets instantly. And stay in on the action. Use your $200 in bonus bets to bet anytime touchdowns on DraftKings. After all, DraftKings is the place to bet touchdowns. If sports betting is not yet available in your state, don't worry. You can still join in on all the fun with DraftKings Daily Fantasy and have the shot to win cash prizes. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. New customers use our promo code FANTASYLIFE and bet just $5 on any wager to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. That's promo code FANTASYLIFE only at DraftKings Sportsbook. The Steelers took down the Chargers, Dwayne, 20-10 to improve to 3-0. Justin Fields has now won 7 of his last 9 starts. If you were into the QB wins are a stat kind of thing, Pittsburgh covered by 2.5, 2.5 point favorites, I should say. The under did cash, though, at a lowly 36. So, yeah, finally did get a rushing touchdown by Justin Fields, just a simple read option from close to the end zone. But another pretty solid passing performance, Dwayne. I mean, I know Calvin Austin did the bulk of the work on that 55-yard catch and run, but Fields had to thread it in there before the safety got over. It does seem like he is, improving in the offense, which makes sense as he gets more and more reps. The question is there even a job for Russell Wilson to come back to at this point? Because I get it. Steelers have scored, 3 offensive touchdowns this year now. So it's not like it's been this lights out performance by the offense or anything. But a win is a win is a win. They got 3 of them. And Fields, at a minimum, man, isn't going out here and having those 4 or 5 turnover games that just completely kill your chances.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to bench him because I think that coaching staff is going to look at it as why mess with something that isn't broken. We're 3-0. Now 2 of the wins, you played the Broncos, you played the Chargers with a very banged up Justin Herbert who ends up having to leave the game. That they don't have any wide receivers or any weapons. So, I don't know. Like, you have a good defense, though. You feel comfortable with what you have. My guess is Fields continues to start, for the team, unless he just makes some major boneheaded plays that open the door for Russ Wilson, which we know it's very possible. But man, 245 passing yards this game. You mentioned it. Calvin Austin was a big part of that. But 73% completion rate this year. That's not a number that you are used to associating with Justin Fields. Anthony Richardson, man, would kill to be at 55%. This dude's sitting at 73% right now. So Fields, man, still getting the work in the design run game, the scramble rate, all those things are good. So he really looks like a guy. As long as he's in there, we should be thinking of him as a borderline QB1.
Steelers play the Colts next week, Dwayne. Girl Scout asks you, Fields or Richardson?
Oh my God.
Who are you saying?
I'm probably starting. Fields has the better matchup for sure. It's tough though, just because we know Richardson, man. But it is tough. They're very similar. They're very similar players.
They are. Same with Jaden Daniels, his QB8. So things can go well for all these guys. The answer could maybe just be yes. We're feeling good about any dual threat guy because of the stat that Dwayne again so eloquently explained earlier. Speaking of the run game for Pittsburgh, Najee Harris, 18 carries for 70 yards. Could have had a touchdown. It was not the same situation we have at Devin Singletary where he purposely fell down. Najee was very much trying to score a touchdown, had 3 Chargers on his back. Sadly got tackled at the 1-yard line there at the end. They went ahead and nailed things out. So could have very easily been a 27-point performance from the Steelers offense against the Chargers defense that, again, has looked much improved this year under Jim Harbaugh. But, Dwayne, not seeing too much from Jalen Warren. Cordero Patterson ended up meeting his snap count. And, man, at this point, Jalen Warren, Dwayne, I'm going to ask you the same question with Tajay Spears. I want to keep him. I do. But at this point, man, this is not 1A, 1B. It's the Najee show. And accordingly, that sucks for all of us, especially us, because we're just a little selfish about that. Sucks for all of our fantasy teams with Jalen Warren on it. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it sucks. You can't have Jalen Warren anywhere near your lineup, but I'm not dropping him. If you're playing in an 8-team league like with shallow benches, yeah, you can cut Jalen Warren. You can move on. If you're playing in a 6 league where you got, 20 draft rounds, you got 20 roster spots, and you're playing with 12 teams, you got to start 2 flex, that kind of thing. Yeah, you're not dropping Jalen Warren. You got to know that the talent is there. And there's other ways the door could open for Jaylen Warren in the coming weeks. But right now, one of them does not appear, at least today, Ian, to be him forcing his way into, like an even split with Najee Harris. That doesn't appear to be in the cards for right now.
George Pickens, 5 catches, 57 yards on 7 targets. A prime potential buy low candidate, Dwayne, because I mean, week 1, he was a kind of ticky-tack OPI call away from going over 100. We talked about him last week, really had Patrick Surtain in hell all game, just wasn't getting, the luck of the draw when it came to some of the penalties that happened on those plays. I mean, look, got the Colts next week. There's going to be some big games ahead, I feel like, for George Pickens, and his value, I don't think, is sky high right now in the public's eyes.
Yeah, I don't mind buying. The challenge is right now when we look at the Steelers, their drop back rate for the season, 48%. Design runs 52%. And then we have questions around Justin Fields or Russell Wilson, whoever's under center. Yes, Justin Fields is playing better, but still, I mean, like he's thrown for under 200 yards in 2 out of 3 games. So I think the systemic issues that you have with George Pickens, plus the fact that Arthur Smith drives me insane, man, with this route participation stuff. He's sitting around an 80% for the year. Did give him 89% today, and we've seen that in the past. Like Drake London would randomly, he'd throw him a bone and give him a 90% route participation. Then the next week, he'd rein him back in. So I like Pickens. I think he's an elite talent. I struggle with knowing when to start him is my challenge. So my opinion on him, as much as I like him, is probably once he does have a boom game, I think I want to try to move on if I can. Now, if somebody doesn't want to give me what I think, the guy's worth because he's a good player, I won't. But I'm fine with buy low for now, but I will be quick to sell high as well once he has what we need is and we know it's sitting there. We know it's in there. Pickens going to give you that 6 catches, 120 yards, 2 touchdowns. He totally has the ability to do that. I just don't know, Ian, how many chances is he really going to get to give you that kind of performance in this Steelers offense?
That is the thing, man. Because as much as I would like to think they're going to have more games with trailing game script, I mean, TJ Watt and that defense is so good that they might just be able to keep playing this Tomlin bully ball all season long, keep it ugly, and ultimately come out on the right side of the scoreboard, at least over that 50% mark, which the man manages to pull off each and every year. Over with the Chargers, just 10 points. But man, Dwayne, they had arguably their 4 best overhaul players hurt in this one. Justin Herbert left early, re-injuring that ankle/foot problem he's had going on. Taylor Heineke came in and Herbert again left in a boot afterwards. Joey Bosa also left the game with a hip injury, and then both of their stud offensive linemen in Rashawn Slater and even Joe Alt injured as well. So might need to, again, downgrade the overall offensive production that we think could even be possible in this Chargers offense while everyone is banged up. That said, Dwayne, we did get at least some good news from a utilization standpoint. J.K. Dobbins taking that leap forward that his production in weeks 1 through 2 certainly seemed to be calling for.
Yeah, really want the offensive linemen healthy. We want all those players healthy, but man, you've got to get those offensive linemen back. That's been a huge part of J.K. Dobbins' success. Overall, the Chargers' success. The holes have been really nice for Dobbins. But here's the big thing. Today, yes, he didn't do what you had been getting from him, and that's why he was a downgrade. We knew this was a tough matchup. Ian downgraded him. I'm pretty sure all of our rankers across the board pushed J.K. Dobbins to borderline running back 2 territory this week because of this Steelers matchup and the Justin Herbert injury. Those were major factors here. But even though he only gave you 9 fantasy points today, Ian, the silver lining for you here is 64% of the snaps. That's his high for the season, and 75% of the team's rushing attempts, only 15% for Gus Edwards. Over the first 2 games, they've split those 40-40. So he clearly stepped into the lead role. Now, was this due to a trailing game script? Are there other factors? Maybe. We can't guarantee that this is going to continue. But anytime we get a signal like this, Ian, where you get a player like JK that's shown that he's really playing well, and then he comes out and he has a dud, but you also at the same time get this potential underlying signal telling you that they might just give him the full-time role, it's a great time to buy the dip. Now, the manager on the other side might not. They might like J.K. Dobbins and be like, I just think that was a fluke that he didn't score those points. But you at least have to go try.
Yeah.
Because if we do wake up and after or next weekend, we're doing this show and J.K. Dobbins has this same workload and they're in a more normal game script, that's going to be 22 to 25 rushing attempts. I mean, that's going to be phenomenal. I don't know that they would even give him that many, but if he even has a chance, Ian, to get to 18, 19 carries a game, it's going to be really hard to keep J.K. Dobbins out of the running back 1 conversation. So I do think he's a guy that you at least want to kick the tires, see if you can buy the dip after this bad performance.
one of these things where, we always say in the offseason, Dwayne, don't hate the player, hate the ADP. And we don't really have an in-season equivalent to ADP. So I guess trade value, don't
Yeah,
hate the
trade
player,
value.
hate the trade value going on.
Yeah.
Because I wrote him up as a sell high on Friday because I was looking at trades that had actually been completed, not in your guys' league, God forbid, never in your guys' league, but in other leagues that do exist on the planet. These happened where it was 1-for-1 for Zay Flowers, Jamison Williams, Devonta Smith, even one ridiculous knucklehead traded J.K. Dobbins for Garrett Wilson. So yes, I was like, please, for the love of God, sell high there. But after this performance, Dwayne, I do think it would be tougher to get anything close to
we
that.
adapt.
So accordingly, we adapt. And yes, that makes J.K. Dobbins currently a bit better of a buy low candidate. So only other point here with the Chargers, Quentin Johnston, another touchdown, Dwayne. That said, it was pretty clearly due to a blown coverage. So I think it was Joey Porter Jr. fly up to jump, a flat route that never went there. Instead, QJ Walsh into the end zone. So just 2 targets ended up being a better day for Ladd McConkey. Team high 6 targets, 44 scoreless yards. I just don't think we want anything to do with this passing game as a whole. Is Quentin Johnston certainly better rated than he was a few short weeks ago? Yes. Is he ever going to be someone, though, that we're confidently starting as a wide receiver in fantasy land? I have a hard time getting behind that.
I really wish we would have had a healthy Justin Herbert to test that theory today. Because if you had a healthy Justin Herbert and you had your run game getting shut down and they actually had to throw the ball more today, I would have liked to have seen these players getting those targets from Justin Herbert late in the game rather than Taylor Heineke, who was just getting obliterated. Like I felt bad for him. I mean, he's getting up with like this helmet, just twisted the wrong way. It was that sort of day for Taylor Heineke. So Ladd McConkey, the one thing you just got to give him credit for, Ian, is he's earning his targets, man. 32% target share today, so he's led the team in 2 out of 3 weeks. So I think there's eventually going to be game scripts if you have Justin Herbert, doing his thing where you'll be okay with it because it's not like the Steelers. They want to run the ball, and even if they wanted to pass the ball, we're really not sure about their quarterbacks. If the Chargers are ever forced to pass the ball and Herbert's healthy, like we really like Justin Herbert. So I think there are some positives. To your point, we know they want to run the ball. They want that to be their identity. So you really need something to go sideways in the game plan to open that door for you to really score those fantasy points. And we don't always know when those situations are going to come up. So maybe if we get a game where we see there's 7-point dogs or something like that, we might know to get them in our lineup. But it will be tricky, to your point, to know when do you ever pull the trigger on putting QJ or McConkey into the lineup.
Ladd has looked good, though. I mean, I would feel pretty nice about his long-term, I think, potential, even in real life and fantasy land. Yeah, had like a 15-yard catch that got called back where you saw some of that, open field juice that I know was a calling card in his prospect profile. So good stuff from Ladd. And good stuff to the Denver Broncos, Dwayne. Took down the Buccaneers to get their first win of the season, 26-7. I would say the most shocking result of the day. Could be wrong. But yeah, either way, Broncos had a really nice performance. 6-point dogs coming in. The under did cash, so 40.5. So Bo Nix looked like the game slowed down for him a little bit out there. Not the world's toughest matchup, I get it, but hey, no sacks, which was obviously one of the great things he had going for him at Oregon. No interceptions and didn't fumble the ball, which again, really tough to be able to say that about him the first couple of weeks of the year. Just 216 scoreless yards. I mean, Cortland Sutton was the leading receiver with 68 yards. I don't think we're getting, really anyone usable in Denver because God forbid, they keep a running back. It's the lead guy for more than 1 week, Dwayne, as well. But again, a win is a win. Good job for the Broncos. Again, that takes us to the backfield, though, where you would have thought 26-7. Okay, this must have been the game where Javonte Williams, maybe Jaleel McLaughlin really got going. And kudos to Jaleel for finding his way into the end zone once. Had a sick freaking juke, man. He took that dude's soul and definitely his ankles before getting into the end zone. But yeah, you check the box score, Dwayne, and Tyler Beatty, RB1, at least in terms of carries and yards. Doesn't quite match the utilization, but man, not a great performance from Javonte Williams.
Yeah, look, man, this is just gross. Javonte still led the team with a 52% snap share, but 19% of the carries today. He had 5. And you had Tyler Beatty out there with 9, getting 33%, even though he only played 19% of the snaps. But this is the Sean Payton experience. Is there some way that I could have 3 running backs that I'm getting involved into my game plan? And we've got it right now with Beatty making his way into it. So really gross. And honestly, just to stay away. I don't want to touch anything in this backfield. It's a low quality offense and they're having to share. They're having to split it up. So all these guys, well, I guess Beatty can't downgrade because he was already at the bottom, but Javonte Williams and Jaleel McLaughlin both get downgrades.
Shout out Bo Nix running the ball. That's still happening. Yeah. So maybe if this offense does get good eventually, he can give us a little something. 47 yards on the ground in a short score. Dwayne, before we get to the Buccaneers, just want to let you know, Rashee Rice touchdown.
Rasheed Rice touchdown. Yes. We love it. Rasheed Rice and Malik Neighbors. Like those are some heavy bags. Those things are going good. Not everything's going good, but those two things are going good.
Just remember those two, everyone. Don't bring up the misses. All right. We all know they're there as well. Let's just stay positive here. Okay. With the Buccaneers, I appreciate that, quick break. But Baker Mayfield, snap back to reality. Whoop, there goes gravity a little bit. 163 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Just never really looked all that poised against the Broncos defense that, to be fair, has been blitzing a lot this year. Maybe it was the schematic side of things. But again, we saw this with Derek Carr. We've seen this with a lot of quarterbacks. You're not going to be able to have 60 straight minutes of good football each and every week in and week out. Chris Godwin, though, did manage to keep on keeping on to a decent extent despite Baker's dud. 6 catches, 53 yards, and a touchdown on 9 targets. Dwain now has more receiving touchdowns this year than he did all of last season. So with the passing game, it sucks to see Mike Evans have a dud, but somewhat expected going up in a tough matchup against Patrick Surtain and company. I would think next week against the Eagles could be that sort of game that we see Mike Evans really get back to balling and putting up the numbers that we know he's capable of. So I don't think we learned anything too new about the passing attack. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Dwain, in a second. But the big news was really the backfield. Bucky Irving continuing to eat into this rushing pie to the point, Dwain, that yes, it was, a bit of a blowout, but 9 carries for Bucky, 6 for Rachaad White. I'm not confidently starting Bucky yet, man, but I'm sure as hell scared if I'm a Rachaad White owner.
Yeah, I would be scared if I was a Rachaad White owner. I would honestly be trying to sell. If you can go add Bucky Irving, you should. He's only rostered right now in 35% of Yahoo leagues, so available quite often out there in the sicko leagues like the ones we play in. Look, guys, we like to live vicariously through you. Like, we can't go pick up Bucky Irving, but you can pick up Bucky Irving. For the love, go do it for all of us. Go team. So yeah, man, 56% of the rushing attempts today. Now, it's worth saying that Rachaad White was dealing with a groin injury. Ian, did you hear that? Groin injury. So that might have been a factor here, but he didn't get many of the carries, but he was out there in the passing down duty. 58% route participation for Rachaad White today. But the thing is, we don't know for sure, Ian, because all the things that this team has not liked about Rachaad White, they had this whole checklist for him in the offseason, things they wanted to see him doing better. He's not doing those things. So this could also just be them starting to say, you know what? Bucky Irving looks better than you, man. We're going to start giving him more carries. And guess what? Bucky Irving's not a complete miss. He's not like dust in the passing game. This guy could continue to carve out a bigger and bigger and bigger role for the Buccaneers. So he's a guy I definitely want to have stashed on my bench. I think he's one of the best handcuff plays in all of fantasy land right now because he has a lot of outs. If we have something where Rachaad White get hurt, or he could just carve out more of this, backfield and end up just taking it over for himself without needing an injury from Rachaad White. So, yeah, really huge. 56% of the carries to Bucky Irving, only 38% to Rachaad White.
Rachaad White was just short on a touchdown, so could have made the day look a little better from the box score, but again, it wasn't going to be all that efficient regardless. So this game hand up did not make my quad box, on my, Sunday evenings or Sunday afternoons at the Hartitz household. We have one big TV with the quad, one big TV with red zone. So only caught, some of the highlights from here, but from the looks of the advanced stats game, this did seem to be more of a breakout performance for Bucky than what we had seen previously. Because I know when I mentioned the kind of yards per carry discrepancy, I would note that a lot of that came from Bucky having that wide open 31-yard scamper in week 1 against Washington, I believe it was. But man, you look at him out here today, ended up forcing, 7 missed tackles as a rusher. That was the highest mark of any running back in week 3. And 69 of Bucky's 70 yards came after contact. So as it stands right now, guys, through 3 weeks of action, Bucky Irving 6.2 yards per carry to just 2.1 for Rachaad White. So not looking too good for Rachaad. Again, could be the groin, as Dwain properly pronounced and pointed out. Appreciate that, Dwain. But yeah, we'll see what keeps on keeping on with the Broncos and Buccaneers. But guys, now we can get to some later Sunday afternoon action. But first, a quick word to our friends over at Experian. Experian is to your finances what FantasyLife is to your fantasy league. It is a tool and resource designed to make your life easier. The Experian app is free to download and serves as a one-stop shop for managing your financial health. And with so many spending and subscription details to track, let Experian handle it for you. They'll help you find and cancel your unwanted or forgotten subscriptions, helping you save money and focus on what really matters. That's right, winning your fantasy league. Download the Experian app today. Just note results will vary. Not all subs are eligible. Savings not guaranteed. Paid membership with connected payment account is required, and see Experian.com for details. The Seahawks took down the Dolphins 24-3, covering as 4-point faves. The under cashed out 41.5. Seattle Seahawks, Dwayne, another 3-0 squad. Bit of a surprise, to I think anyone that was, going into the 2024 NFL season. So Geno Smith, 289 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. Generally led an efficient passing game. We did see DK Metcalf put the Dolphins safety on skates on the back of a 71-yard touchdown. He went over the 100-yard mark on just 6 targets on the day. Noah Fant, another nice game, 6 catches, 60 yards. Sadly, Dwayne didn't exactly see the JSN week 2 breakout, though, come lead to anything else going on in week 3. 3 catches, 39 yards, which is actually a hell of a lot better than what we saw for a lot of last season. But Tyler Lockett, 8 targets, just 3 for Jackson Smith-Njigba. So Seahawks are winning football games. I think Ryan Grubb, the offensive impact he's had is very good. Tyler Lockett doesn't look completely washed out there. JSN, though, Dwayne, we thought we were maybe at a point where we could start booming up the ranks. Still looking like a wide receiver 4.
Yeah, he led the team with a 97% route participation in the game. DK Metcalf was second at 89%, Tyler Lockett 76%. So he's holding on to the playing time. So that's at least a positive. But we've been a little worried about JSM, man. Like, this dude should be a more consistent target earner at this point in his career. Only 9% today. So he's essentially had one good game in his career. He's had one other okay game at the end of last year, but one truly good game. I mean, we're talking about a player that, it's not a super long sample, Ian, but I mean, we're heading into week 4 of his second season. Like, really would like to see more than this. I think he is really tough to trust. I think the talent maybe still emerges. At least he's getting the routes, but I'm with you. I'm treating him like a wide receiver 4, and I struggle to get him to wide receiver 3 territory this week just because, like, we've seen one good game. That's what we've seen from JSN. As much as I love him, as much as the supermodel liked him, like, we want to be behind JSN. We need to see more consistency, though. And you got 2 other guys that are earning targets with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, so that makes it tough as well.
Man, this just seemed like such a nice game for him. Jalen Ramsey, spending the heavy majority of his snaps on the outside, seemed like there'd be a good opportunity to funnel into the slot. Alas, here we are talking about how it wasn't. Noah Fant, though, popped up for the best ball squad, 6 catches, 60 yards on 6 targets. No, not exactly someone we can trust on a week-to-week basis. There are a lot of mouths to feed in the Seattle offense, but Noah Fant, still someone that is presumably good at football. Zach Charbonnet, though, Dwayne, also looking a little bit better at football. Certainly did not look good the first 2 weeks of the year. 91 yards and 2 scores on the ground, also chipped in 16 receiving yards. Kenneth Walker still hasn't gotten back to practice. So we'll see, maybe it is a situation where he's just back out there full practice on Wednesday and there's no worries about it moving forward. But man, as long as Walker stays out of the picture, Charbonnet has a legit RB1 role right now.
Yeah, I mean, Charbonnet is a must start, and I had some pushback on that. I talked about it this morning on Twitter, but the problem is, like, we've got an offense that we like, the quality's there. And we've seen whenever Kenneth Walker is out, like, they're just loading this dude up. And it happened again today. He had 85% of the snaps. That's absolutely freaking nuts. 86% of the team's rushing attempts. And he had a 76% route participation. He's not leaving the field on passing down. So what does that give you? Even if the game script goes south on you, he's going to be out there on passing downs. And that helps insulate him from game script issues. So quality offense with weapons that can move up and down the field. The one thing that they don't really have, Ian, is they don't have a great offensive line, but they're making strides in that department this season. So I do think that those are positives for Charbonnet. I agree. He's not as fun to watch as Kenneth Walker, who's definitely more electric, but Charbonnet can still do everything. He gave you 25.7 fantasy points today. So, man, anytime somebody has the utilization he does in a quality offense, it's really hard to keep them out of the running back 1 conversation.
So, guys, for our show sheet that I put together before these Sunday night pods, I have, 4 categories: top performers, sheesh, injuries, and then questions I want to make sure I get to with Dwayne. Yeah, no Dolphins top performers, Dwayne. That's what happens when, we have Skylar Thompson going out there and really struggling to get anything going before he eventually got injured with what I believe was a chest injury. Tim Boyle came in after and did not get anything better going on. Rib injury. Okay, my bad. Yep. Tyreek Hill, 40 scoreless yards. Jalen Waddle, 26 scoreless yards. I mean, Devin Achane, we got up to 58 yards. We got the extra 3 receptions there to help in PPR land. But this is going to be a struggle, Dwayne, for anyone trying to start Dolphins here as long as Tua Tagovailoa is going to remain out. Honestly, I mean, these performances should really kind of show guys that Tua, as much as you want to call him a system quarterback, as soon as the system starts crumbling, as soon as he is out of the picture, not exactly the best data point for that. But man, rough showing in this one. Seahawks have been playing some great defense. Don't get me wrong. Mike McDonald, very tough scheme and everything. They get the Titans next Monday night, so a little bit of extra time to get their act together. But man, Dwain, like Tyreek Hill and Devin Achane, I know we're not benching these guys, but we're probably going to have to downgrade them. God, outside the top 10 options at their position.
Yeah, man, I had a really bad feeling about HM, but when I found out Mostert was out, I was like, I moved him up. But man, this offense, what do we have now? We have potentially a bad offense that we're getting high utilization in. We just talked about what that meant for Devin Singletary, what that meant for, Ramondre
Don't
Stevenson.
say those names after Achane.
I get it. I get it. And we're not.
You're not wrong. I'm just saying it hurts to hear.
But my point being, he's not all the way to their level because he's a better player than them. But we haven't seen the explosiveness here in these last two games. He's probably still dealing with a high ankle sprain. I mean, the guy's out there probably playing hurt right now. So right now, what we need from HN are some of those classic, 30, 40-yard runs for touchdowns that would really help boost, his fantasy value, because it's hard to trust this offense to get you down inside the 5-yard line and really give you those chances to score touchdowns. So yeah, it's a downgrade to the entire offense. I mean, Tyreek Hill, we're looking at this today. Not only was the offense bad, Ian, he had a 16% target share. I mean, Jalen Waddle had a 16% target share. These guys weren't even targeted today. So I don't know what was going on with the offense. They're going to get more targets than that in the future, but this shows you what the floor is like. And this is what we talked about on the show last week. Guys, there's a potential for a 150-yard passing game. They got a little over that today. Once you add in Tim Boyle's numbers, I want to say they were around 175, 180-ish, but still, that's not what we're used to your point, with Tua. And guess what's gone? The upside for a 350-yard passing day, which Tua clearly gave you. So now you've got a way lower ceiling. You've got a way lower floor. It just is what it is. Tyreek Hill was a high-end wide receiver 2 for me this weekend. If Skylar Thompson isn't even out there, we got Tim Boyle. I don't know. How much further do we move him down? I don't even know the difference between those two players. I'll have to think about it. But Tyreek Hill, mid-range wide receiver 2, Jalen Waddle, wide receiver 4, Achane, still a borderline running back 1 because of how much work he's getting. He had 71% of the snaps today. But still, it's tough. We need the explosive plays back for Achane.
I hate to say it, Dwayne. Achane's pulling a 2023 Travis Etienne right now. We're not getting the explosive plays that we thought were going to be there. He's still living just fine because he's getting unexpectedly, every down volume. But
Mostert's going to be back eventually.
Exactly. So
he's going to get more carries than these other two dudes. I mean, Jeff Wilson got 3 carries today, and Jalen Wright had 2. Raheem Mostert's getting more than that. Raheem Mostert could force a split with Achane. So once he returns, that's the real question. Then what do we do with Achane once Raheem Mostert returns?
Dwayne, the thought popped in my head, and if it popped in my head, it means it might have popped in someone else's. Do we sell high on Achane? Do we want to trade Devin Achane?
Oh, I was telling people last week, anyone that asked me, I don't mind selling Dolphins. I mean, because we don't know what's going to happen with Tua. All we've heard is he's not retiring, but we know nothing other than that. And if the Dolphins lose all these games, are we so sure Tua plays this year? We're not sure. So the thing is, if you're going to sell HN, though, you do still need to make sure you're selling high.
Yeah.
You don't just want to sell him for nothing, but I'd be willing to be reasonable on my price tag for all these guys.
Gosh, this hurts. Hurts to say out loud, Dwayne, but
the Tua injury is really the biggest one we've had in fantasy this year, because the ripple effect of it impacted all these guys. And they were early picks. You could say the same thing for the Packers and Jordan Love and those wide receivers, but you didn't have to take them where you took Tyreek Hill in the top 4 picks of your draft. You took Jalen Waddle in late round 2, depending, you're playing best ball, you're getting Waddle in round 2, 3. Playing in home leagues, Waddle was round 4-ish. Still, those are really high picks, and HM was a round 2 pick. So that's a lot.
I got really excited last week. You mentioned it before, but Chase Daniel does some really fun research on the league. He shouted out some other point he made recently, but he proposed a 3-way trade. I'm not sure what it was on, but he basically said Rams get Bryce Young, Dolphins get Stafford, and the Panthers get the Dolphins second and the Rams third rounder. Look, Rams had an incredible win today. I'm pretty sure McVay's still trying to do everything in his power to win football games this year, and that involves having Matthew Stafford on your team. But lordy, Dwayne, something like that. As much as I love former Pro Bowl QB Tyler Huntley, I don't think he's the answer here.
I agree with AJ Hawk's toxic finger in the chat. Like, just go get Joe Flacco. Go get anything. I mean, you got to do better than what you have right now. Skylar Thompson, the internal clock is not ticking when this man drops back to pass. I mean, he had time several times and just getting blown up, no feel for the pressure. Like, wasn't necessarily bad as far as like just watching him throw the ball, but the feel for the pocket and holding onto the ball way too long and taking some of these sacks. And some of that, led to the injury as well.
Skylar Thompson drops back and he's just like, it's Skylar Thompson time. But then, maybe it shouldn't always be Skylar Thompson time. So, all right, Lions took down the Cardinals 20-13. Detroit covered as 3-point faves. The under did cash at 51.5. Again, this game and the Eagles and Saints really disappointing. Goes to show you never quite know as much as we think we do about this glorious game known as football. So with the Lions, I mean, look, Dwayne, they were pretty freaking lucky to get this win. I'll say it, man, because before halftime, they snapped the ball at 2:01 and they proceeded to give up a defensive touchdown. The Cardinals got absolutely saved by the refs saying that they did not get the snap off in time. And lo and behold, the Lions ended up scoring later on that same drive. So in terms of utilization stuff, I don't think anything was too unexpected. Continue to not exactly see Jahmyr Gibbs take that step forward as a receiver that was barked about all off season. However, he does get 20 receiving yards and a touchdown in the stat sheet because Ben Johnson drew up a beautiful hook and ladder play, again, inside that 2-minute warning that ended up springing Gibbs for 6 points.
He was also wide open on a Texas route underneath. It would have scored a touchdown where they threw it to Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Okay.
The touchdown Amon-Ra scored on the end-breaking route, if you see that replay, like Jahmyr Gibbs has no one anywhere near him. But Goff just saw he had the single, and that was his first read. 70% of quarterbacks throws guys are on the first read. And so he saw he had the one-on-one with Amon-Ra, so he didn't get to his next read, which would have been, Jahmyr Gibbs, which would have been another touchdown.
And again, I don't doubt the dude's ability to catch some passes and get going in that facet of the game. It just, to this point, really hasn't happened. But, that's life sometimes.
It's a crowded offense, man.
It is. You got David Montgomery going 23 carries, 105 yards, and a short touchdown himself. Obviously, our one true sun god, 75 yards and another touchdown that Dwayne mentioned. Sadly, though, Dwayne could be dwindling down that offense just a little bit. Sam Laporta did suffer an ankle injury, originally carted to the locker room, but it was just before halftime. And you and me have complained plenty about what actually constitutes the whole carted off the field, tweet from reporters. Comes back in after halftime, but then gets ruled out as questionable. So a la Joe Mixon a little bit last week. Look, we don't know what the extent of the Laporta injury is right now, but we have seen guys over the years have that adrenaline briefly return to the field, like Cooper Kupp did, honestly, last week as well, and then have it be something that does actively end up keeping them out for a few weeks after. So, Dwayne, it's kind of like San Francisco where, look, if Sam Laporta goes out, yeah, sure, Brock Wright can, join the tight end 2 lower end ranks and everything. But God forbid we do miss some Sam Laporta, man. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery, Jameson Williams, big time boost for all parties involved.
Yeah, I think that's where you see Jahmyr Gibbs get a real boost, is getting some of that, more of those underneath looks to go along with what the sun god is getting. The only other interesting thing here, we'll have to monitor the Laporta thing. We'll see what happens with it. Hopefully, he's okay. But Jameson Williams, he had his down game, still had a 92% route participation rate and 13% target share, but obviously wasn't blowing up the box score, gave you 1.8 PPR points. And it is something to monitor. I'm not saying that Jameson's not going to still have his big games, but we've talked about this. Once defenses know like that, okay, you're for real, then they have decisions to make in their game plan. And we do see a lot of players that break out and they look like they're off to stardom. And once defenses decide to give them a little bit more attention, they can't keep on keeping on. So that's the one thing I really want to watch with JMO. And I do think it's important because it's a guy that struggled, honestly, to break out over his first 2 years. Now, there are some good reasons. We know he came coming off of an injury as a senior in college. That was a late season injury that basically gave him a red shirt first season. Then last year, we had the suspension, kind of got out of the doghouse at the end of the year, but he was never a high end target earner. So it'll be interesting to see where this goes for JMO. I'm not saying it to tell people to freak out, but it's just something that I think we have to monitor. The good news for him is, like, the Lions have a lot of other weapons. So it really comes down to what a defenses decide they want to take away. If JMO gets shut down again next week, well, guess what? Defenses will probably start being like, fine, we're going to take Amon-Ra St. Brown and whoever else away. And that's going to give JMO a chance to still shine. But I just really want to see what this looks like now that JMO's got their attention.
Overall, though, just another solid performance by this team, particularly the big three being Sun God and the two running backs. Right now, Dwayne and Montgomery, RB17, RB11. And then this week's, I'm sure, going to be something close to a top 12 finish. Similar, sentiment for Gibbs, who ripped off 2 top 15 finishes during the first 2 weeks. Guys, it's been, I think it was 2017, Alvin Kamara and Mark Ingram. Last year, we had Devon Achane. I saw your comments. I got to work on my pronunciation as well if I'm making fun of Dwayne. So, fair play, everyone. Devon Achane. Okay, we're working on it.
Montgomery.
Yeah, I know. Well, let's not get too carried away, Dwayne. All right, some things are just instilled.
I hope you never change that, actually.
It's just accidental every single time at this point. Devon Achane and Mostert got there as well as top 12 running backs in the same team. Would make a lot of sense if Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs can get there in 2024. Now, Dwayne, with the Cardinals side of the football, a little bit of a step back. I mean, that was the best we have ever seen Kyler look last week, and it honestly kind of seemed like he just wanted to keep that hot stretch going. I saw Benjamin Solak, who always does fantastic work, formerly of the Ringer, now at ESPN, note that it did seem like Kyler was passing up some easy completions, trying to get more of those big plays to Marvin Harrison Jr., particularly downfield. And lo and behold, Dwayne, 187 unrealized air yards for Marvin Harrison Sr.'s son. Still had a touchdown, almost had a second one on a back shoulder throw that went off his fingertips. So not a bad game by any stretch. Just saying coulda, shoulda, woulda been so much more for that connection. We are not worried about them, and nor are we worried about Trey McBride, just as long as he's healthy, though, Dwayne. Did seem like he was going out there. Might have gotten concussion at the end of the game. Nasty collision. Didn't see any final ruling on it, but obviously that's not going to be ideal for anyone if he is going to be missing time. So get better soon, Trey, and obviously Laporta as well. I guess the only other kind of conversation point, if there is one for the Cardinals, Dwayne, is just James Conner only racking up 10 total touches in this one. I mean, I don't think we saw Trey Benson or Amari DiMercato making a meaningful push forward, did we? Maybe just a situation of, hey, the Lions have a pretty good front seven.
No, nobody else pushed forward. It was, you've got the Lions who want to establish the run and they want to stop the run. We see this from a lot of teams. The teams that want to run the ball, like their coaches are also set on stopping the run. And that's what we have with Dan Campbell as well. So you had 9 carries for only 17 yards. It was just a bad day at the office for James Conner. Still 76% snap share. Just ran into a tough matchup. So probably going to have to give the Lions a little bit more respect as we move forward as a run defense. Obviously, you can still get them in the pass. But no big takeaways here. And like Trey Benson, like in a game where, they're trailing, he only had a 4% snap share. So really the only time he's getting on the field are in these games where they're leading.
I get so pissed off when I type in Cardinals schedule on Google and they give me this dumbass baseball team. No one cares. They just got eliminated from the playoffs. Okay, the Cardinals face the Washington Commanders next week. Let's freaking go, Dwayne. Then we can get Kyle
Marvin Harrison for 220 yards,
700 yards, something like that.
I knew I wasn't going to be high enough for you.
Couple more games to get to, everyone. But first, want to give a shout out to our friends over at Mike's Hard Lemonade, because fantasy football season is here. And while that may be cause for celebration, there will be some hard days ahead. That said, guys, Mike's Hard Lemonade wants to remind you that hard days deserve a hard lemonade. So after a hard day spent scouring the waiver wire, concocting the perfect trade, or tinkering endlessly with your starting lineup, it is time to quench your heart and thirst with a Mike's Hard Lemonade. Always remember, hard days deserve a hard lemonade. I could use a Mike's Hard Lemonade right now, Dwayne. Might have one after the show. Why the hell not? But let's get back into the final few matchups. The Rams took down the 49ers in a shocker, man. I thought this game was over in the first half. Lo and behold, it was not. 27-24 for the 6-point Dogs covering. The over did cash there at 44.5. So we'll get to, the best wide receiver on the planet apparently here in a couple minutes, a.k.a. Jawan Jennings. But with the Rams, Dwayne, what a performance by Kyren Williams and all of his loyal fantasy football truthers. Not one, not two, but 3 touchdowns, 2 on the ground, 1 through the air where he freaking somersaulted in the end zone. That was objectively really cool. 89 rushing yards and 27 receiving yards. So, hey, Kyren has the same workhorse role that he has, last season as well. And I was on our LG TV show this morning and basically saying like, hey, Kyren consensus rank, he is down at RB10, which is a little bit lower than last year. But even with the Rams faltering, Dwayne, even with the offensive line being so banged up, when you almost never leave the field, man, guess what? Hard to not call you an RB1 in fantasy football land.
Yeah, 87% snap share today, 92% of the team's rushing attempts. And Kyren just looked, he wasn't great as far as like yards per carry and stuff, but he was punching in the touchdowns.
Yeah.
Like, and you just, you could just tell he was a man on a mission. Like that second touchdown run, like Stafford knew it. Like as soon as he handed it off, he already had his hands up being like, okay, this is a touchdown. So he had 2 carries inside the 5-yard line, and he made the most of those. And so, yeah, he's not leaving the field on passing downs either. 76% route participation, but really impressive to see Kyren, because I downgraded him in the ranks this last weekend. And to your point, like he was still in a territory where you're not benching him, but when you don't have the weapons of Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua, and you don't expect the Rams to be moving the team up and down the field, and you're expecting a trailing game script the whole way through against the 49ers, and Kyron's still able to get there and give you 31.6 fantasy points in a PPR. Major hat tip to him. I mean, he overcame a lot of circumstances today. And to your point, Ian, the best way to do that is with volume. But isn't it funny how this can work either way? We just talked about Achane and how bad the Dolphins looked, and that's part of why he didn't score any fantasy points. And you look over here at the Rams, and while Stafford still did his thing, it's not like they threw for 300 yards and were just like knocking on the door all day. Like they had to really work to make this happen, and they made a good comeback, and Kyren goes off for 32 fantasy points. So sometimes, we just don't know. We can't predict what these things are what's going to unfold before us. But we do know when you're getting these types of carries and snaps and things, there's always a chance, at least, for really good things to happen for you.
Sometimes, Dwayne, we spend all week debating DeMarcus Robinson versus Jordan Whittington, and lo and behold, Tutu Atwell catches 4 or 5 targets for 93 scoreless yards. Also threw a dime to DeMarcus Robinson for what was nearly a 30-yard catch down inside the 5-yard line, but upon further review, he did not actually catch the ball or had a foot out or something along those lines. Didn't count as the moral of the story there. So, Dwayne, again, no Cooper Kupp, no Puka Nacua. The Rams didn't put Cooper Kupp on IR just yet, so it could be a situation where he is back sooner rather than later. But for the time being, anyone we can get overly excited about in this passing game?
Yeah, I mean, Tutu's it. I mean, 83% route participation. He was number 1 on the team behind DeMarcus Robinson and Colby Parkinson, but he was actually earning targets. Look, we saw Atwell last year in the early part of the year really do his thing, and then ultimately they decided, I think it was because blocking in the run game and stuff like that, to where DeMarcus Robinson really became more of the third wide receiver on the team. Jordan Whittington, a guy that we were a little bit excited about. Let's see what happens. And we talked about it. We said it was complete boom bust. Like he could be a complete miss, but if we're putting a chip somewhere of someone that might just end up being the player to go off, like Whittington would be the guy. Only 38% route participation today. Tyler Johnson, a guy that had actually been playing more. It went down 48% route participation today. So it does look like Tutu Atwell and DeMarcus Robinson, at least for now, Ian, are the guys that are going to be on the field the most.
With the Rams, had the teaser before, but yeah, Jauan Jennings, 3rd and 1. Apparently that's how many touchdowns the man felt like scoring today. 11 catches, 175 yards, and again, 3 scores on 12 targets out there. So we knew he was good, Dwayne. Again, the guy was unironically the MVP frontrunner in the Super Bowl, for crying out loud, for a good 10 to 15 minutes of real life time there. But man, nobody could have seen this coming out here. So wasn't like Brandon Ayuk didn't get targeted. He had 118 unrealized air yards. Deep shot where he got held, perhaps, was the difference between him potentially adding 50 or so yards to his, tally, and accordingly helping the McFarland and Hartitz bank accounts. But yeah, man, Jauan Jennings, really freaking good at football.
Yeah, but he's not this good. And I mean, we've seen a guy for his whole career. Like he's never really been like this big time target earner. Now he's been in some pretty crowded offenses. So we always have to give someone like that a little bit of a benefit that they might take a step forward. But I would venture to say that Jauan Jennings won't score this many fantasy points over the next 4 games. Even if Deebo Samuel and George Kittle miss, he will not combine for this many fantasy points. He scored 46.5. So again, like I think he might be a 10 to 12 fantasy points per game player, but I don't think he's going to do anything like this. So Jauan Jennings, like I think it's just one of these fantastic performances. And if you were watching the game, like Ian, like he was playing great. Some of these catches the guy was making, like over defenders' helmets, plucking the ball. I mean, he was balling. He was definitely in the zone. He was feeling it, getting the touchdown on the side of the 10. Like he's got some definite chemistry with Brock Purdy in that area. So maybe that's an area I should give him a little bit more credit for, because that's what we saw last year in the playoffs, was that part of Jauan Jennings' game where he was a guy that Brock would look to once they got down inside, the 20-yard line, inside the 10, stealing some of those touchdowns. So when I look at Jennings, I'm still looking at him as a wide receiver 4 at best heading into next week. Even if we don't have Kittle, we don't have Deebo Samuel. You mentioned Brandon Ayuk. Yeah, he didn't come through, but a 33% target share today. So Brandon Ayuk will be ranked inside my top 6 wide receivers again next week if we don't have the other starters for the 49ers.
See the 49ers are dealing with in week 4, the New England Patriots. So could see Christian Gonzalez shadow matchup. But when Ayuk is right, man, I don't care who the corner is across from him. He should be more than good enough to make good things happen there. So really was a nice performance from Brock Purdy. I mean, completed 22 of 30 passes, 292 yards and 3 touchdowns, 41 rushing yards added on, Dwain. I mean, you saw him out there really making a ton of time. And this is why I've always been almost a little bit annoyed with the whole Jimmy Garoppolo comparisons, because they show the efficiency numbers, which, by the way, Jimmy G had some of the highest efficiency numbers in the league in San Fran. So it's kind of weird to be using those as like a negative when Purdy has the similar numbers as well. But their play styles really couldn't be more different with how often Purdy is able to play out of structure and make things happen by extending the play. So good game from Purdy. Not the toughest matchup, I get it. But again, didn't have a lot of his guys out there as usual. Still managed to put up some solid numbers and do more than enough. Should have been able to do more than enough to get the victory. Jordan Mason, Dwain, could not find the end zone. Still racked up 21 touches, though, and 87 total yards. Still certainly going to be a weekly RB1. Did see a little bit more Isaac Guerrero, though, and as someone that spends, a good 2 hours of my week on the treadmill grinding a bunch of freaking waiver wires, I will say, Dwain, Isaac Guerrero is someone that you do still see out there more than most, and God forbid something happens to Jordan Mason, maybe Isaac Guerrero could be, the next Jordan Mason.
Yeah, he looks like the next guy in line. Like you mentioned, it wasn't a ton of work, 14% of the snaps and 15% of the rushing attempts, but we didn't have another running back besides the fullback, Kyle Juszczyk. So it does look like if something happened to Mason, knock on wood, we don't want that to be the case. It would probably be Isaac Guerrero getting the first shot.
2 more games, ladies and mostly gentlemen. We had the Panthers take down the Raiders 36-22. Carolina was 5.5-point dogs coming into this one, because why wouldn't they be? Over cash here at 40. Andy Dalton, Dwain, the Red Rifle. I'll use his correct nickname this time. First quarterback with 300-plus yards and 3 touchdowns in a game this season. What a performance, dude. And as much as I would love, and I did make jokes on Twitter at Bryce Young's expense, how could you not, Dalton just killing his trade value and all. Like, literally marches down the field the first drive and scores a touchdown after we're hearing how no one could, survive in this environment. But, my God, Dwain, the touchdown he threw to Adam Thielen, just 30 yards on a freaking rope in between 2 defenders. Dalton was going out there and making big boy throws, in addition to just being inside the offense and taking what they were giving to him. I don't think the Panthers are going to score 36 points every week or anything like that, but man, Deontay Johnson bags alive. Jonathan Brooks on IR. I'm feeling good about it again. This is awesome.
Absolutely.
Andy Dalton looked great, man.
Yeah. And, your bold call of the week last week, Chuba Hubbard, 28 fantasy points. That's a great bold call. Ian.
I wasn't going to bring it up.
To call Chuba Hubbard. We can take those calls really anywhere we want. We can play them safer. We can really get out there. You stretched and you went out here for Chuba Hubbard and got 28 fantasy points out of this dude. So very nice by you, man. He had 72% of the rushing attempts, 60% of the offensive snaps. Miles Sanders was still out there doing a little bit. 40% snaps, 24% of the rushing attempts, but it was nice to see Chuba very involved in the passing game. And that's really where he made his hay today. Chuba Hubbard was out there with a 14% target share, but 42% targets per route run. So the guy, when he was in a route, was really getting those looks. I think he had with 55 receiving yards. Yeah, 55 receiving yards and a receiving touchdown. You mentioned Deontay Johnson. I just had to pause for dramatic effect because it's so good to see Deontay Johnson back in our lives. 38% target share today, Ian, 26.2 PPR points. So Andy Dalton, we talked about it, put Deontay Johnson back in the wide receiver 3 territory, but we said, probably going to be hard to get much more excited than that. Obviously, right out of the gate, Andy Dalton proves all that wrong. He gives you a wide receiver 1 performance with Dalton there. So, and we've talked about this. Deontay Johnson's one of these players, Ian. He just needs a serviceable quarterback. Yeah. He doesn't need a great one. He's already proven that he just needs a serviceable quarterback. So we know the truth with Andy Dalton won't be this. This guy's not going to throw for 300 yards every game and 3 touchdowns, but it is nice to see some stability with the offense. And then the last guy, Adam Thielen, you talked about the touchdown. That kind of saved his fantasy day. He finished with 13 PPR points. He only had 14% target share. We'll have to wait and see we'll have to see how healthy he is after getting hurt. And I think that was I felt like that was late third quarter. So we'll have to see what happened with Thielen on the injury report. But right now, still, probably the number 2 target in this offense. So at least you get an upgrade with Andy Dalton.
I was surprised because even before that injury, it's not like they were airing the ball out that much more afterwards. I thought it could be more of a 1A, 1B between him and Deontay. Really it did seem like from the first drive of the game, though, it was the Deontay Johnson wide receiver one show. Could have been an even bigger game for him, Dwayne. I mean, he had what probably was a drop on a short fade, was kind of over the shoulder, not the easiest catch in the world. But if we're calling Rashid Shaheed's a drop, certainly would Deontay's as well. And then later in the game, man, wide open from the 1 yard line. Pressure helped cause Andy Dalton to sail that one. Rare miss there. So Xavier Leggett drew a DPI down to that 1 yard line to set that potential play up. But yeah, man, otherwise just Carolina Panthers fans enjoy this one. I know we've had a lot of, I don't even want to say slander. I thought it was deserved how bad they played the first 2 weeks and kind of what they've done over the past year or two. But hey, things are going great now, and accordingly, giving you guys your flowers. Over there with the Raiders, Dwayne, was supposed to be the time we could trust Zamir White. Not so much. 10 carries for 34 scoreless yards. Didn't see a target in the passing game, which is one of the problems for a game script dependent running back on a team that we know isn't all that good. So, man, I'm seeing it now. Amir Abdullah and Alexander Madison playing more than Zamir White. So I made a joke when Madison got the goal line touchdown because Antonio Pierce loves to get up there on his podium and talk about how much he loves Zamir White. I'll give them some slack on that one because they were like third down, they converted, but it was a situation where they might challenge the play. So they kind of rushed up the line and gave Madison the ball. But man, Dwayne, number 3 in snaps on your own team. I know he still led the way in touches, but are we done with Zamir White?
Yeah, I mean, this is just one of those games that, look, the game script got completely away from the Raiders. So we're talking about a team that was coming in as 7-point favorites against a team giving up 200 rushing yards per game in the Carolina Panthers. So if there was ever a week to use Zamir White, it was still this week. Like, that's what all the things pointed to. Well, we weren't planning on a game script where they were getting blown out by the Panthers and Andy Dalton. And these sort of things happen. So look, Zamir White, we've talked about it. He is very game script dependent, but last week we saw him actually getting all the drop back work as far as route participation. He got none of that this week. 9%, 42% went to Alexander Madison, and the trailing script really led to an increased role for Amir Abdullah, who had a 42% route participation and saw his highest snap share of the season, 34%. So what this data point showed us, now that the Raiders were truly getting blown out, like we thought they would more often this season, Amir Abdullah is the guy that's going to get the 2-minute offense. Amir Abdullah is going to be the fly in the ointment, which just makes this really gross across the board for all these guys. So yeah, Ian, I'm out. I'm done. We were already done with Zamir White, but it's essentially we're like, okay, if you're gonna start him, like, we have to upgrade him. Like, he hit the trifecta of all the things that you would want. You got the matchup, you had increased utilization the week before, you've got a situation where you should be winning the game, but none of those things came to fruition. So whatever.
I was going to say, we both actively faded him throughout the offseason, talked about it, had a great matchup this week, and he was consensus ranked the RB25. So wasn't like we were shouting out these, top 10 performances, but either way, not great. Bob, receivers, Dwayne, I don't want to say both of my bold calls hit, but Jacoby Myers clawed his way over 20 PPR points as well. Thanks to, I always love when this happens, an octopus scored a touchdown and then got the 2-point conversion as well. It was all in garbage time. Please, for the love of God, don't believe that this is going to be a newfound.
Hey, but it happened. I'll be honest. Like, I kind of felt the Chuba one when you made the call. I was like, that's a really good one. The Jacoby Myers, I was like, man, that is out of thin air. Like, how are we going to think this guy's going to get the targets when we got Adams? I'm not saying he's not going to have his weeks, but it feels really random, like, as to when they could occur. But hey, hat tip to you. You hit it.
You're like, Hartitz, it's 9:30 a.m., man. It's too early for that kind of stuff. But you know what? Worked out. And also worked out for Trey Tucker, 7 catches, 96 yards, and a score. Accordingly, guys, as you can probably put together, we got some duds from Devontae Adams, 4 catches for 40 scoreless yards, and Brock Bowers, 3 catches for 41 yards, and just 4 targets for Brock, which was surprising because there was a couple kind of checkdowns where Brock looked good, was making guys miss and, picking up some chunks. And I was like, oh, man, he's about to start eating here because he is effectively their check down option when they're playing from behind. Just didn't end up, working out all the way. So
he left the game for a brief moment, I think, being checked for a concussion, but 60% route participation this weekend. Ian, we talked about it last weekend. He was down below the 70% mark, which was like, okay, like, let's keep an eye on this. So I can't say for sure, like, how long he was out due to having to be, screened for the concussion. So maybe he was going to be closer, to 70%. But this was the thing we talked about with Brock Bowers. Really good player, but he's still in a rotation with Michael Mayer, and that's not ideal, especially for an offense that we knew was due to regress.
Home against the Browns next week. I think we're going to be confidently starting Brock Bowers. Devontae Adams, even if you don't love him, he's still going to be a top, 15 wide receiver at the absolute worst. Otherwise, I think we're good on the Raiders offense.
Yeah, I mean, and teams are getting to the Browns in the secondary now. Like, it's not like you can't play them. The Browns are still a decent defense, but it's not a team that you just got to fade starting your guys against.
And Myles Garrett, I believe I saw dealing with 2 injuries to both feet. So yeah, not ideal.
From childhood, like this due to screws in his feet, and like they say, it's really not that big of a deal, but it's causing like a lot of soreness, I guess, is the deal.
I mean, I guess
evidently he had surgery when he was like 9 on both feet, and it's something to do with the hardware.
Dude looks like a Greek god, so it's not all that surprising to hear he's had some stuff going on. But yeah, apparently he is fine. So Kings stay Kings, get better, Myles Garrett. Last one, everybody. The Ravens took down the Cowboys despite Dak's best efforts to, yield that comeback. 28-25. Baltimore did cover as 1.5-point road favorites. The overcash here at 47.5. Like, yeah, Dwain, Ravens 28-6 lead. Mama Hartitz was sending some not so nice text messages about the Cowboys to me. I'm sure the McFarland household wasn't all that, hyped up either. But thanks in large part to a Justin Tucker missed 46-yard field goal, you absolute fraud. The Cowboys managed to come back and again make things interesting at the end. Yes, stat padding. You can say the Ravens were in prevent defense and all that, but I don't know, man. Still seemed like, it was pretty tight coverage out there. Kudos to Dak and company for at least not rolling over and making it interesting. But as always, Dwayne, got to start with the winners here. And Lamar Jackson, great vintage, whatever you want to call it, MVP level performance, 182 yards through the air and 1 touchdown on 12 of 15 passing, man. Just incredibly efficient out there. Also chipped in 87 yards and a touchdown on the ground because why not? He is one of the best players in the National Football League. Of course, the really surprising, at least a little bit surprising performance, Dwayne, Derrick Henry becoming the latest running back to make Jerry World his home. 151 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground, stiff-armed countless Cowboys, and also chipped in a 23-yard reception. So, hey, we said it after the Chiefs game, man. When Henry and the Ravens are playing from behind, it's not going to be pretty. They have Justice Hill. They paid Justice Hill. They trust Justice Hill on pass downs, but God forbid the Ravens get a chance to play with the lead. Look out for the big dog.
And you could just see it. The Cowboys wanted no part of Henry early in that game. The Cowboys defense, I'll give credit, late in the game in the fourth quarter, actually kind of got a little bit of a second win. They were trying to really hit Henry, nearly had a strip fumble. But man, for that middle part of the game, they just did, and you could see it coming. You're like, Henry's going to have some huge runs. I was sitting on the couch watching it with my son. I was like, there's going to be some huge plays. Like, get ready. And he has Derrick Henry in his fantasy lineup. So he was actually like, oh, okay, I'm good with that. Like the Cowboys, going to lose. And I get 30 fantasy points from Derrick Henry. He was good. He also had Malik Neighbors in the lineup. So it was a good day for Camden all the way around. But yeah, man, the Cowboys, Ian, like I know we're talking about the Ravens here, but like their defense, if you can run the ball, you're going to beat Dallas. Once you get them to where they can't just pin their ears back. And this is going on for 3 years now. This was happening with Dan Quinn as well. Now that defense was creating more turnovers, but basically you're taking their pass rush away and they have nothing in the middle. They do not have defensive tackles that can stop the run. They don't have a linebacker that can stuff the run. They don't have a big hitting safety that can help stuff the run. This team is built to stop the pass. And so when you come out and you run on them, you take all the advantages of the Dallas defense away. And what better running back in the league to do that than Derrick Henry? I mean, you talk about a freaking mismatch for the Cowboys. We should have seen this. I mean, it's not like we had Derrick Henry ranked low. He was borderline running back 1 for us this weekend. But we should have probably seen this one coming a little bit more. The opportunity here for Henry to really have a big time game.
I agree. And we will continue to watch the film and get better, particularly when a beastly running back is facing the Cowboys. Not so sure Devin Singletary qualifies in week 4, but again, we'll keep
an eye out there.
But he might. We'll see. It is in New York after all. Thursday night football is known to get a little bit wonky. But yeah, guys, again, Baltimore really stormed out, had that 21-6 halftime lead, so didn't keep their foot on the gas from a passing perspective. Did see Nelson Aguilar have a real nice, 56-yard catch and run, almost scored a touchdown. Rashad Bateman scored a short touchdown, pretty much wide open in the end zone. Zay Flowers, the odd man out, 3 catches for 20 scoreless yards. As for the tight ends, Dwayne, 1 combined catch for 4 yards between Isaiah Likely and Mark Andrews. Man, cannot get things going for Mark. I mean, look, did we see anything with the routes that were especially wonky? Like, this is pretty troubling, man. 4 combined yards for these guys?
I'm just making sure I don't have anything clicked wrong here. Like I'm not just looking at a certain order.
Oh, no.
Yeah, this is bad. Route participation. Now, again, this game ended late. and sometimes depending on the way this data gets fed to us, we're working
Tell
with
us.
PFF through True Media. It could be wrong, Ian, but 35% route participation from Mark Andrews today.
I'm seeing 6 out of 15 routes as well.
Yeah, not good. Not good, guys. So I don't know if there was an injury. I didn't see anything on that. Like I had it on red zone and stuff. I didn't have the Cowboys game fully tuned in because I was already in. Once I come in here and I start doing data work for the afternoon, it's like I just have red zone on in this room. I didn't see anything about an injury. So if anybody sees something in the chat or knows that there was an injury, just let us know. But yeah, it was Isaiah Likely at 65%. Now, they didn't need to throw the ball at all. I mean, they dropped back to pass 53% of the time, and they had a design run 47% of the time today. But still, that's terrible for Mark Andrews.
That is
going to get a downgrade, Ian. He's going to get a downgrade unless we find out that he was hurt.
That is rough. I tried searching Twitter, and the first thing was like, NFL should have announced Mark Andrews' retirement out there, instead of being so quiet about it. Shout out JJ Zacharyson for that great bit there a few short years ago. So, yeah, a bit of a somber note there for the Ravens tight ends. But again, great performance to get their first victory of the season at a minimum. And again, with the Cowboys side of things, spirited comeback, good to see from the team after, again, just such a lackluster performance against the Saints. Seemingly was on the way to more of the same before those 19 fourth quarter points again. So Dak, 379 yards and a pair of touchdowns. And again, Dwayne, look, he was hitting shots down the seam to Jake Ferguson, who had 95 scoreless yards. Cavante Turpin and Jalen Torbert, were catching touchdowns out there. I mean, it wasn't this just fluky dink and duck. His production against the Packers in the wild card game when it got up there, like that was pretty fluky, just comeback mode, not too much resistance being offered. But I thought the Cowboys offense did look pretty good in the second half. Hunter Lupke, isn't that one of your dads or, favorite guys out there?
Yeah, Lipke. Yeah, he's right. Like, get Lipke some more snaps.
Beat Kyle Hamilton on a freaking out route. That was shocking. Had another nice catch and run.
Runaway freight train.
Yeah, man. So Cowboys did some things, again, just the targets to Brandon Cooks every time reminds me, like, why did you guys enter this year with Brandon Cooks as your only other receiver other than CeeDee Lamb that, defenses will even pay half a bit of attention to. But ultimately, man, it's Dak. It is CeeDee Lamb, who didn't have the biggest game, had a couple, uncharacteristic drops, if you will. So not too worried about that in the future. Good news, Dwayne. Jake Ferguson going out there did not seem limited at all. Mentioned it before, 95 yards, 11 targets. I mean, with the way the tight end position is looking, dude, we might have Laporta and Trey McBride. I hope not. I'm knocking on wood. But if they miss time, Jake Ferguson might be a top 5 tight end in fantasy now.
Yeah, it could happen. We were a little worried, like, were the Cowboys rushing him back from the knee injury, but apparently not. They limited him a little bit today. Again, and this data could be slightly off, but 73% route participation. The dude had 11 targets, though. I know that number's right. 22% target share because they had to throw it so much, but a 28% targets per route run today for Jake Ferguson. And to your point, not a lot of other help. If this is CeeDee Lamb with a 14% target share, you don't see that often.
Yeah.
The Ravens must have really been scheming to try to take him away. So, yeah. And Brandon Cooks, man, he's cooked. We saw it. The last 2 years, been a big-time downturn, has been bad against man coverage, and then now we're seeing it again this year. So Brandon Cooks might occasionally give you a spike game, but there's really no reason to even keep him on your fantasy roster if you've got better things that you can do, unless, obviously, you're in a deep gross league, and then keep Brandon Cooks on your roster. But you're never going to know when to play him.
Dropped a touchdown, which would have been cooler if we caught it. But even then, it was only from 18 yards out. So it wouldn't have exactly, been the saving score to change anything we just said. So the running back room, Dwayne, seemed like it was leaning a bit more towards Dowdle early. But if I'm reading it correctly, sure seems like Lipke was actually actively eating into that running back pie.
Yeah, Lipke was very involved in the second half. So as soon as you think Rico Dowdle's emerging and you see that 46% snap share versus 20% for Zeke, then you look down. Hunter Lipke, 39% of the snaps. So it was a three-way rotation, and Lipke had a 29% route participation. So basically, Lipke took any of the passing down snaps that Zeke had been getting, but maybe Zeke's getting phased. I mean, right now, 20% of the snaps today, only 19% of the rushing attempts. He can't be anywhere near a fantasy lineup. He's definitely getting a downgrade in the utilization report. Like Zeke had been like borderline running back 3, maybe still a little something. No, like this dude's going to be like RB5 territory after this game. Rico did have 50% of the rushing attempts, so he was still the lead back. But it's hard to say it's a positive, to your point, with them getting a third player involved.
I know before the game coming in, it was Gus Edwards, number 1 with the most, carries without forcing a missed tackle, and Zeke was number 2. And Zeke also doesn't have the explosive run yet this year, 10 plus yards as well. So as we saw Gus start to get phased out, turns out Zeke could be on that same train home out of town.
Was it this bad, Ian? Do you think at some point they do actually give Dalvin Cook a chance? Because it's already really fans here are already going nuts about it. Like, because I live here, they were already calling for Dalvin Cook last week, and Jerry Jones was getting all the questions on the radio show. So we'll see what happens. But like fans actually, I don't know that Dalvin Cook has anything, but it's funny how these things work, right? Where it's like, hey, we just need to change something. We're 1-2. The fans are pissed off. I do think there's a chance like we could see Dalvin Cook playing.
This stat is wild from Bill Barnwell of ESPN. The Cowboys coming into this game ranked 31st out of 32 teams in rush yards over expectation. Yeah. The next gen stats model projected Cowboys back should be gaining a league high 5.3 yards per carry. Instead, they're averaging just 3.7. So apparently, Dwain, it can't get any worse. Let's see what old man Dalvin Cook can bring to the table. I don't know. So yeah. That's going to wrap up the game-by-games recaps. Dwain, just real quick, it is halftime. Falcons up 14-13. Kyle Pitts had a 50-yard catch down to the 1-yard line. Bijan got to vulture him after that.
Drake London touchdown.
Touchdown early. Yep. Kirk Cousins interception before the half. On the Chiefs side of the ball, Rashid Rice eating. Seems like a split situation with Carson Steele and Samaje Perine each having 6 carries.
That's big for Perine, man, because Perine's going to get the passing down work. I can almost guarantee it. If he's going to be in an even split with Carson Steele getting the carries, that's going to clearly make him the guy that you're going to want on your roster here for Kansas City. We're at halftime. We'll see how the game ends up, but that's very positive for Samaje Perine.
No Kareem Hunt in this one, but hey, as we just saw with Dalvin Cook, speaking of, I mean, just because they sign these guys to the practice squad doesn't mean they actually get elevated with a sense of urgency. Certainly it didn't happen on this one. So great stuff by you, Dwain, and let the folks know a cool little utilization score they can find tomorrow morning by 9 a.m., I believe.
Yeah, 8 a.m. 8 a.m. Ooh. It will be up. We have the utilization report, which you can go in, you can see the game log view, you can see the season view, but yes, we have the utilization score now, which as we go, it gets stronger and stronger. The 4-week rolling number is the one that was the most impressive when we did all of our off-season research. So once you've got 4 weeks, which we're almost there, guys, we got 3 weeks, it's so much more predictive, moving forward. And it's stronger than what we have with fantasy points. So you guys can check that out for all the positions except quarterback. We couldn't really find anything with quarterback that worked, so we didn't force it. We didn't try to say, hey, we have something when we didn't. But for running back, wide receiver, tight end, you guys go make sure that you check it out. And the utilization report, Ian, we'll be writing that up tomorrow, and it'll be coming out Tuesday morning.
Gotta love that. Make sure you all check it out accordingly. I will be back here at 9 a.m. Eastern with my guys, Paul Churchian and Chris Allen, breaking down some Monday Night Football and some other big overreactions. Sunday Night Football, I should say. It's getting late, Dwain. And all other cool stuff going on. Maybe Paul will make fun of Chris's train set again. Had some electric moments going on last week for sure. So appreciate you guys again for tuning into the Fantasy Life Show Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Sunday night. Don't you forget about it. So for Dwain, I'm Ian. Thanks again for tuning into the Fantasy Life Show.